inside of Cisco iOS. So I came up with a way to do this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Tickle Shell to do it. And I've got the script here sitting on this notepad here. I'm going to show you what it looks like so I don't have to write the whole thing out. Basically, we're going to drop in a Tickle Shell. We use the puts command. We're going to create a file called hack.sh. Open it for read-only, but it's still read-only plus allows us to write to it. We're going to change the host name, change the secret password, add a bad admin, and I'm not going to do this. I will explain that some other day. But that's the idea. I'm going to do some bad things. I'm going to change the host name and change the password, and add a administrator, right? So I'm going to grab this, and by going in here and pasting it, it's going to open up Tickle Shell, and it's going to create this file called hack.sh. Now, if we do, does somebody have a question? I heard somebody's mic going. Or that was the inadvertent, somebody turned their mic on, realized when I said something that it was them, and they turned it off. Okay. So now if I do a dir, we can see that we've got a file called hack.sh living in Flash. And if I do a more hack.sh, we can see that this file is now there. So if I wanted to, I can now copy the hack.sh file to running config, and now my device is, changed its host name and its password and everything else. Okay, so there we have it. I was able to create a quick script, and now I copied it running, and it is now working, right? I've got my hack code in place. Now, obviously, what I'm doing inside this script, I could do a lot more malicious things, do route injection, network address translation, creation of tunnels to push data off elsewhere, whole ton of interesting things I could do if I wanted to manipulate, data on this device. I'm just doing something simple like change the host name, which we can see. The thing is now there's this file living here called hack.sh that obviously if an administrator came by and did a dir and saw that there's this hack file here, they're probably going to get curious. So today, and this literally was today, I started coming up with, I've had these ideas for years, but to actually put it in a demo form and build it into a lab for the class, which is what I was doing today, I came up with some really cool ways where we can obfuscate this data and make it look like something that, that's legitimate, that it really isn't, right? So here's what I came up with. First, what I did is I crashed my router. Now to crash your router, there's a hidden command. It's called test crash. Now if you do test ? You'll see that CEF, CNS, there's no crash option here, right? So what I did was I did test crash, which if you hit question mark, it says unrecognized command. But when you hit enter, it brings up a menu and says, well, how would you like to crash the router today, Mr. Dugan? Would you like a bus error or a jump to zero or a software force cache? How would you like to crash the router? So I went in and crashed the router, and it spit out a crash dump file, right? And I already deleted the crash dump file, but the crash dump file essentially looked like this. So here's the name of the crash dump file that was created, and here's essentially what the crash dump file looks like. Something like this, start of collection. It was a huge file, it's 200 and something K, and I just wanted that much of it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the beginning part of this crash dump. I'm going to create this file. So I'm going to grab this and copy that. Now I could just add it in here, which I'm going to really. We could do this here, and we want to do that there. All right, so now I've got this crash dump. Right, I'm going to create a file that's basically a crash dump. And at the end of the crash dump, I'm going to have my code that I want to, basically break the router with. You'll notice I've got a string of gobbledygook here. You'll see that come up in a second. Okay, so I've got all that, but the file name was this. So I'll grab this here. So I'm creating a fake crash dump, just like this. Paste that in there. All right, so now, oops, went too far. Oh, no, I didn't. There we are. copy, head back to the device, get out of the crash dump menu. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and put that in. And now, tickle quit, dir. I now have a crash info file that looks like a legitimate crash info file. If we do a more on this thing, copy, take a look at it, it looks like a crash file, right? Regular old crash file. And but the end of it, start crash info, well, this has my hack code, right? Which anybody reading the crash dump would see this and go, hey, that's obviously not cool. So I wanted to go one step further. How do I make this not look like this? Now, just to show you that it still works, even though I've got a bunch of stuff that isn't Cisco code in here, it still works. So if I go ahead and change my host name back to demo RTR, and we do this, and we do copy, it's actually Facebook. Copy that crash info file to the running config. It's going to error a whole bunch of times at all the locations that there's errors. And then, hey, look, hacked router again. So any place inside of that file that there wasn't legitimate commands, it just spit out an error and saying, hey, I didn't know what this was. But as soon as it got to the actual code, it went ahead and ran it. So I'm now able to hide that, that falsified code into that file. But wait, there's more. I want to make it even worse. So if I, again, do more and look at this, anybody who were looking at this crash dump and went down, a couple pages, they're going to see that this is obviously bad. So I wanted to go one step further and obfuscate this as well. So here's how I did it, and hopefully this works. What I wanted to do is add in upper ASCII characters, because Cisco doesn't handle upper ASCII characters very well in Cisco iOS. They only do 7-bit ASCII. So, but I have the capability of doing 8-bit ASCII. So by adding in, just me rolling my forehead on the keyboard, on my Apple keyboard with the Option key pressed down, I came up with this string of garbage, right? And with this string of garbage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into my string of code here. And what it's going to do is going to see this and do weird things. So first, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it there. I'm going to add some white space, because white space doesn't matter. Paste it again. Do some more white space here. Do not put white space after your password, because that becomes part of your password, so don't do that. So I'll add some more white space there. We'll put the string of gobbledygook there. Put some more white space here. Should be good. You could make this even worse by actually pre-compiling this and getting the MD5 hash, which make it even harder to see. Be a good idea. We'll do that a couple times, and then we didn't really do anything with that, so I'll just leave that alone, and then that there. Okay, so now I'm going to recreate this crash dump file. So we're going to do delete the crash dump file. Oops. Oh, whoops. Try that again. There we go. And delete the crash dump file. Now I'm going to rebuild it. Now, I can't build it here because I can't even type any of these characters. It won't let me. For instance, if I try copyright symbol, which is Option G on my keyboard, I get nothing, right? And even if I telnet over, right? So I telnet over to the device. We're still hacked router. If I telnet over and I do Option G, again, I'm not getting the right code. So here's how to do this. How to get the router to recognize these extended ASCII characters. If we go into line VTY 015 and we do exec character bits 8, once that's done, I can now type extended ASCII characters. However, line console 0, which is where my other screen is, if I do the same thing, and do this over here, nothing, doesn't work. Cisco's own CLI Analyzer, which was their answer to PuTTY, it's also free, cool tool, I really like it. It only runs 7-bit ASCII, which is kind of neat, because anybody running this tool is going to be even more confused by the fact that I'm using upper ASCII characters. So that being said, there are certain tools out there. PuTTY supports it, but you have to go in weird place in the options to turn on 8-bit ASCII. Most things are set, so it's 7-bit ASCII. So you start doing these 8-bit ASCII things, weird things are going to happen, which is what we want. But the OS still recognizes it, which is even cooler. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this over here and cut and paste this code, which now doesn't even look like code anymore, right? So I'm going to recreate this file. Here's the end of the file. We'll do this over here. Oh, I did delete it, right? I did. Good. So we're going to go ahead and paste it in. And there it is. So it enabled me to type it all out and took all those extended ASCII characters. So it took it. So now when I do tickle quit and we do a dir, I had a file, right? And when we look at the file, we do more crash info. Now it writes the whole thing out in hex because it thinks it's data, right? Because the crash info, because it's got all those extended characters in it, it's not actually recognizing the file as a text file anymore. So now it's even more obfuscated, in this way. If we look at it, if we turn off the extended characters, line VTY 015 and character bits, change it to 7. We'll do the same thing on the console port. Console 0, character bits back to 7. We go back over here and we look at, oh, that works. Control A, more. Okay, so this actually did this different than it did before, but all right, whatever. I'll have to figure that out. What was really weird was it was actually putting in ASCII first, showing you the crash dump, and got to the end of the crash dump, and then showed it in this hexadecimal format, which was kind of what I was after, but I'll have to play with it and figure it out. Like I said, I was just figuring this this demo out today. But either way, the crash dump is showing in a manner that's all in hex. Obviously, somebody's going to have to figure that out when they get to the end of this. Even when they get to the point where, the file ends, that, those usernames and admins and all the actual code that's in there, it's there. It's just a lot harder to see now. And anybody seeing this is probably going to not space through, several pages of it to get towards the end of it to where, the actual stuff is. And we can make it more obfuscated if we need to. But does it work? That's the real question. So we go back here, we change the host name back to whatever. Well, I guess it didn't like me just rolling my forehead on the keyboard. Oh, it did work. Okay. And we do a copy of that file to running config. Should get some errors, and it works. There we are. All right, so we have a hacked device. So we're now able to store completely obfuscated code inside of Cisco iOS. It's really nothing more than Cisco iOS commands, but stored in a way on the device that it's going to be really difficult for an administrator looking at this device to realize that he actually has malware on the device. You've now witnessed the very first Cisco iOS virus. So there you have it. That's my demo for today.
Nice. Well,
what do you think?
That's awesome. Cool. This is gonna be great, Steve. This will be really good on the website. So yeah. As background, I noticed that we've got our next 2 instructors now in the webinar. We've got a dozen people that have showed up on the Periscope platform for this stream, which has never happened to me in any of the streams we've ever had before, which makes this really weird. There's 2 people watching us on Facebook. So anyway, but so
Did
you know,
anybody have any questions before I?
yeah, no, that was about, you took the words out of my mouth.
All right.
Let's is there anybody we've got for all the people that are registered, there's less people that have shown up, but does anybody want some questions? Let's ask. No one going?
Sure, the chat window's working for everybody, because all I'm seeing is panelists in the chat
Yeah,
window.
me too. So let's send everybody a chat. Hi, folks. Last call for questions. Let's type in the right keyboard too. Too many keyboards over here.
I was having keyboard issues earlier. I was trying to set this demo up. All of a sudden, I hit a key and it would like scroll like 15 copies of the same character. I'm like, oh, this is bad.
It's funny because I've been in Zooms all day trying to wrangle all the schedules for all this stuff, and of course, Windows Update for both my machines, and there was a Zoom update on one. And when one of the machines came back, the keyboards didn't work. So it was like, yes, right, exactly what I want an hour before a webinar.
Great time, right?
Perfect. Yeah, but you know, it's par for the course. Yeah. No questions.
Scheduling anything on Patch Tuesday is a bad idea. You should know that.
Adrian, hi Adrian in Australia. I think you're still in Australia, but he says no questions. Just think it's cool. Folks are saying hello. Okay. Well, thanks, Steve. I think that'll actually work great. We'll slice that up and we'll put it on the website as a little tutorial for your course, and folks get a feeling for it. And with that, I think we'll promote. We need somebody else in this chat. Let's go over here and promote someone who I just met for the first time today, but I'm quite excited to see on the where's Mr. Bob Monroe, who's out in Hawaii. And he's going to talk about the next segment that we have here, which is going to be from Hacker High School. If he's turned on, let's ask him to unmute.
I'll go ahead and sign off here and turn my camera off and let somebody take the stage. But thanks for having me, and I really look forward to doing the training come next month. I'm really excited.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate all your flexibility on time schedules with all the juggling today. So.
Somebody had to go first, right? So might as well be me.
Okay, let's see. We've asked Bruce or Bob to start. Oh, there he is on cue. Wow, it was almost like we planned this. Oh my gosh!
Imagine that.
Let's see. Oh well, I guess in the break we lost a few viewers on Twitter, but whichever. The point here is we're also going to be recording this stuff and going to ask questions for folks. So, you know, I gave you a little bit of a warning earlier today about where we're going with all this. So, I'm actually curious to hear the answer for this because you know we were introduced about Hacker High School and we've been working on this, but this is really the first time I've actually gotten to meet the folks who are going to be instructing the kids and doing the courses. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Mr. Monroe.
Pretty boring life. Let's see. Well, I spent 22 years in the Army, and the Army does not promote you based on how good of a pilot you are. They don't. Nowhere on my officer evaluation does it say, Bob Monroe is an amazing pilot, promote this guy. The United States Army says, okay, what else do you do for us? So in 1989, I decided to get into cybersecurity, get into digital security back then, back when we had bulletin board systems and you had dial-ups, and you had to literally go and meet the bulletin board operator before they'd allow you on board. They're not going to just, give you access like today. Or you had to exchange something with them to give you access or pay them some sort of a monthly fee. But once you're in the network, you're part of the network. Well, this went on until 96 when I got busted by an 82-year-old librarian. I was using the Colorado Academic Resource Library as a launching point into the Edgar's network. And the librarian found out about it. She shut me out. And so I decided I was going to change my ways. I was going to be a good guy now. Well, then the FBI came knocking on my door and offered me a position And I can tell you right away, don't ever work for the FBI. They've got no problem getting you killed. No problem whatsoever, no qualms, especially if they ask you to do a penetration test of their criminal mainframe computer. Do not take that job. Nope, 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 nope. Anyways, rolling along a couple of decades ago, I met up with Pete Herzog, saw the OSTEM, the Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual. My God, this is the holy grail of security. This is brilliant. And I've read all kinds of stuff in books and magazines and 2600 and just, frack and all that stuff throughout the years. And the OSTEM just hit a note with me. And I said, man, I've got to work with this Pete guy. So Pete reached out to me and we're talking back and forth. And he goes, hey, I got this project called Hacker High School. So I said, Pete, do you mind if I rewrite a lesson or two? And he's like, yeah, have at it. Good luck with that there, Bob. So I rewrote it, sent it back to him, and he said he was laughing his tail off. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And I had a blast rewriting it. And he said, okay, go ahead and rewrite a couple more. So we rewrote a bunch of the lessons, turned them into textbooks. And so we started teaching Hacker High School, especially here in Hawaii. Hawaii is not known as a technology hub, but there's plenty of students and there's very, very smart kids here. So we started teaching Hacker High School here in Hawaii. And it's just become successful until this pandemic hit. So I really appreciate the opportunity that you folks are giving me to be able to present Hacker High School to anybody that's willing to listen.
I think that we have some opportunity. I don't know if I was saying this earlier. I say this to a lot of people. I think there's some challenges to the online remote stuff, but I think that there's also some opportunities for accessibility. I mean, you're in Hawaii right now, and you haven't had to fly anywhere. You could be teaching kids in Shenzhen and wherever else in the world. We might. I guess hopefully, presumably in English, but North America, Canada, Florida, UK. And I think that global reach is quite interesting. So you've actually taken my next question. What I was going to ask you is how Hacker High School started, but you've completely told me. So tell me a little bit about. So you've been doing it for a while. I think you've got a feel for the kind of kids that and who's really best suited for this. Tell me a little bit about the kids that are normally the students for Hacker High School. What's some good guidance for parents if they trying to decide, well, is this right for my son or daughter, or I guess I shouldn't be gendered, but tell me a little bit about what you think are the appropriate attributes for the students for Hacker High School.
Well, first of all, the name Hacker High School will right away pretty much tell you what we're about. We're about hacking, not criminal hacking, because criminals are criminals and hacking is not criminal. If you're going to be a criminal, that's something else. Go do it someplace else. But with Hacker High School, the students that we're trying to capture are those that have questions. They're curious. They want to learn. They want to explore. They want to see what else is out there. And then you got the other ones that want to make $250,000 a year as a penetration tester in New York City. So we give them the opportunity. Do you want to work at McDonald's when you graduate high school, or do you want to go out there and make a couple $100,000? It's up to you. So that's the area we're looking for.
That doesn't seem like a hard question, especially.
No, but some of the parents are like, wait. I say,
I think you're right though. I mean that guidance, it's very easy to steer the wrong way. I used to sneak into a university computer lab. I think I told you that story this afternoon. I missed that tap on the shoulder moment and went to the path of the light side as an engineering student, and kind of got back into security after I was from the professional world. But I think that so I was telling you earlier, I've got my son that's interested in your material as well, and there's that chance. Everybody's got that curiosity. Well, sure, I shouldn't be do that, but I could do that. So giving folks a little bit of that ethical structure and sort of as while you're showing them the cool new toys and showing them the I guess like gun safety, except for cyber in the cyber domain is I think a really good idea. And so now tell me for the kids, is there some minimum sort of level of computer literacy that really is needed? I mean, you're talking. Just I got the feel from you just from talking to you earlier. I think you'll hopefully tell us a little bit more about some of the tools and some of the exercises you go through there. But what kind of literacy are we looking at for the students? I mean, certainly they probably
Well, like
should
Steve
have
said earlier,
access to
as long as you
computer.
got a pull, you know,
Do you really
well,
bring
we
them up
provide,
from the base level?
not well, we start with like essential commands, and beneath the internet we get into, you know, daemons, playing with daemons, different operating systems, and then we launch into malware analysis, digital forensics, cybercrime, laws and ethics, database security, email security, you know, passwords.
What would you say is the average age of your students? I mean, it's called Hacker High School and cybersecurity for teens. But
you're the only one that gets it. I get all kinds of other people that are going, oh, you know, my 8-year-old. I'm like, dude, it's called Hacker High School.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, but let's make that explicit here. Well, so I can tell you this as a parent right now. I mean, this is what makes it difficult. You have some kids that learn to type. I had the rule with our oldest two boys. They got admin on their own laptops when they were 10. You know, so what, or 11, 10 or 11, I think is about the right time when you should start to get to installing your own patches and learning to do some of those basic rote things. But you know, other people say, oh, hey, my 15-year-old shouldn't be allowed, should be if they have a lockdown. You know, so there's that boundary zone. I'm wondering, the real guidance that I'm looking for here is somebody who has got a 13-year-old. And I actually think I've got the person in mind, because there's a friend of mine who's interested in this course, and he contacted me about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, my 13-year-old is actually, his nickname's Linux, or is, you know, so anyway, don't want to give too much identifying information, but he's interested in this course, and I'm trying to engage him. And there's some other folks who have kids, they're trying to, you know, they come from very technical background themselves, and they're trying to get engage more enthusiasm in those kids, where those are the cases that I think I'm looking to get answers for those folks. Is this, I mean, you're talking about taking folks from a fairly rudimentary step and kind of doing, you know, build the basics and then build on top of that and keep going. That's how I understand how your course is going to go. But would you have any sort of guidance for the folks right at the early younger teen years? Right, when's the threshold when this course starts to make sense for the kids?
I was at a school last year. It was elementary school, and there was an 8-year-old that had 5 computers in his, or excuse me, had 5 books, computer books in his backpack. And granted, I'm here in Hawaii, and there's some special folks here in Hawaii. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but he was the son of one of the special agencies that's here. And I'm like, that kid is the kid that I need to talk to. He's the one I need to get, especially. I'm looking for the ones that, you know, they're kind of dabbling a little bit. I want to catch them before they go over that border, before they do something that they're going to regret, and show them, look, you know, we can have fun. Like Steven is over there, you know, he's making his own malware. That is cool as all get out. And that's what we want the kids to see is, hey, you can do this. You can go in there and you can play around, you can break things and have a great time, but do it legally and do it ethically and get paid for it. That's what we're looking for.
I think the key message there is it's actually more fun to be doing once you get into the. I think, you know, once you have permission to break into places. I mean, it's. I gotta say, more pen tests can be way more entertaining than I'd probably, you know, maybe not than doing the bad stuff. I think that's a really good message that you're delivering there. So. Yeah,
like you pointed out, do you really want to look over your shoulder for the rest of your life? You were talking about somebody tapping you on the shoulder saying, you know, it's time for you to get off the network because you're not supposed to be here. Do you want to, like Marcus? I mean, he got caught years after making that little bit of virus code that he wrote. The FBI snagged him in Vegas when he was hungover. Yeah. You know, do you really want to have that over your shoulder for the rest of your life?
And I think that's actually a really powerful message for the folks thinking about this course for their kids too. You know, this is a good path that will lead them away from the temptation that, you know, you might not be able to shield them from on the internet. I'll jump in and tell a little story, because I discovered Kernahan Ritchie when I was 13, and that book changed my life. I fell in love with C compiler. So I actually think I give that book away to kids. When I see kids that fall into that profile you've just mentioned, I often will go and buy them a copy of these days this might be a Python book rather than the Kernahan Ritchie. But I think that engaging their curiosity like that, challenging them a little bit with something that's a little bit more technical than they've experienced before, I think that has real rewards in terms of the development.
Or just to even just let them know that, hey, there are others like you out there. Look, I was your age at one point, and look at me. I'm not in jail, but hey, not that I'm a shining example of humanity or anything, but just letting the kids know that, hey, there's folks like you out there, and here's our world. Here's what we can do, and let me show you this world.
So tell me a little bit about a couple of takeaways. What do you think that are some of the more fun things, more useful, the things that folks walk away from Hacker High School, or kids, teens walk away from Hacker High School with?
I know everybody in the world says this, but I actually learn more from my students than I teach them. And what amazes me, the part that I love, is when these students, I'll give them a challenge. I'll say, okay, I want you to do this. And you got 10 minutes to do this. And they'll do it. And I'll say, okay, great, you did that. Let's talk about what you did, how you did it. And now let's cut that time in half. Now you got half the time to do the exact same thing or make it twice as hard. And they do it. And they're like, dude, you're not supposed to do that. Or, lady, that's incredible. That's amazing. And you're just thrilled to death to watch them learn and grow and share that information with one another. And that's the most powerful part about it, is that light bulb. When you see that light bulb click on and they go like, oh, I understand it. I get it now. And that's the big takeaway for me, is for the students, is when they can walk out of the classroom and say, okay, I now have the tools I need to guide me for however long, or, hey, we can contact ESACOM or Hacker High School and they'll answer my questions, or, hey, we know there's another community out there, and I'm not just some lone guy out there on Minecraft or something like that.
So, what I'm chasing you for, you told me a wonderful little story this afternoon about some of the things that you do in your class that I think that gives folks a feeling for what it is. You want to tell us a little bit how a typical class goes, and you also had a nice little list of some kinds of tools that you're going to be looking at, and I think that was very indicative of the material. So I'll let you. Do you remember the anecdote?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you go.
It may not be the right antidote, but I've got an antidote for you. A lot of the students, they have questions about tools, and they want to see what's available out there. So we'll show them. Here is a Panagachi, a Raspberry Pi. It's got a power pack on it, and it's running Panagachi. It also has an e-ink display on it. I won't turn it on now because it'll sever my connection. But we can take something like that and show that here's a very inexpensive tool, and here's how it works. And it takes advantage of the 802.1W standard that no one adheres to include Cisco, except for one product that they have. And that is allowing deauthentication frames to occur. So that device takes advantage of that, and basically it deauthenticates, and then it forces your device to re-authenticate, which create the handshake again. And that device captures that handshake, and then it goes about processing the handshake and coming up with a password and things like that. So we show them, okay, this is the device, this is how it works. But the most important part is how to protect against this. And that's the more intellectual part of cybersecurity, is how do you protect this?
Cool. So, I guess we've kind of covered a lot of that material. Is there a message that you want to give to parents about the course? And we're planning on putting some of this material up on the website. Do you have any sort of final words on this effort? Do you have more to show us?
Oh yeah, I've got an entire presentation if you want me to.
You know what? So we according to schedule, we do have time, and so if you've got some stuff for us, I'll I'll bow out and let you do a bit.
Well, it needs a little bit of participation.
Okay, if you want an audience, I'll be an audience.
That'd be great.
Whatever
Thank
you would
you.
like.
What I like to do is I like to start with an activity, you know, an icebreaker, kind of gauge where everybody's at, and also let the students know where we're coming from and where the focus is going to be for the next week or 2 weeks or however long the session is. So I start with a simple question: you guys want to play a game? And of course, you know, everybody wants to play a game. Yeah, heck yeah. What's it going to cost me? It doesn't cost you anything. But let's play a game. Think of it as an interview scenario. You start off with, you're in a room, you're invited into a room, and in the room is a table. And on the table is a light bulb, and the light bulb is on. Name 10 ways to turn this light bulb off. Can you think of 10 different ways of shutting the light bulb off? Or at least
I always think of fairly exotic ones. I would go for the breaker box.
Okay.
You know, do for the end run. You know, you could try water as a squirt gun, but that one's hard, so I wouldn't do it. Mechanical devices, clubs to break it, wire snippers. 10 ways to shut the light bulb off. You could short circuit the circuit. And mess with the wires. You could go and 10. That's hard, actually. So let's see. A gun. You could, although that, you know, mechanical impact. That's kind of close. There's the old-fashioned ways to unscrew it. Do we have 10 yet?
You got 10.
Awesome.
All right. Now, you know, they always got the light switch. You know, the unscrewed light bulb, like you said.
Oh, come on. That's too easy.
I know, but just wait. It gets worse. Okay, you're in the exact same room, same table, same light bulb. The light bulb is on. Now name 10 ways to keep this light bulb burning forever.
Burning forever. That's hard. See, I have UPS generators, but forever would require some kind of perpetual renewable power source like solar power. You'd have to wire it to a solar panel. Forever is hard, so you could wire up some hydroelectric, something that would run typically if there's a river. I think not forever, but I don't know if nuclear power plants count. But so maybe not. So it's a big light bulb. You can't use one of these perpetual micro power sources because they only produce nanovolts. So that is actually a hard problem.
And this brings up the point about cybersecurity is in our industry, it is really easy to break something. The light bulb, it's really, really easy to break. Anybody can go in there and break their network connection or break a printer or break into somebody's network. That's easy. Everybody does it. It's hard to protect this. And that's what our jobs are as cybersecurity professionals. Our job is to protect this asset. This is our asset. And our job is to protect this against all those people that want to take it away, that want to shut it off, want to break it with a baseball bat, want to turn the light bulb off. And that's the part of security that very few people teach, which is the protection part. And that's the big core part of Hacker High School is how to protect the asset. In our industry, we think of security as the asset is in the middle and you've got this moat and high castle walls and you've got of course the water on the outside that's got the dragons and the alligators in it, and you have the big turrets that are protecting the asset that's in the middle. And the problem is that's not reality. Our assets are not like that at all. Our networks don't look anything like a castle that's being protected by big walls and a moat. It doesn't look like that at all. In fact, our networks are incredibly porous. So instead of thinking about having something that's protected way defense in depth where you got layers and layers and layers, that doesn't work. It's never worked. So stop thinking like that. Name one battle that has ever been won by waiting for the enemy to stop attacking. There are none. It's never happened. The enemy's not going to stop attacking. So stop thinking that way. So what we do is we teach what we call the Mobius defense. The Mobius defense is basically you take a strip of paper, twist it, tape it together, and you'll notice if you follow the inside and outside of a Mobius strip, there is no inside or outside of a Mobius strip. There is a constant in and out, in and out. And your network's the same way. There is no inside of your network. There is no outside of your network. So stop thinking of your network as just something we can just, shut it down and protect it, and no one can get access to it by using access controls. It doesn't work like that. So we teach the Mobius defense as one of the primary methods of thinking about your network and how to protect your network. One of the tasks that we have, and Stephen brought up that very interesting concept of using the command line interpreter, because we'll tell the students, okay, everybody go onto their VMs. You should have a VM there on your either upper right hand or left hand side of the screen. Bring up your VM, bring up Windows. When you bring up Windows, hit the Windows key and R. And what comes up is you've got a little box. Now type in CMD. CMD is command. Everybody knows that. Command, CMD. Command COM. So you can see it's running. A little box comes up. A little terminal box comes up and oh yeah, I got command COM running. Okay, great. That's fantastic. Now let's talk about command COM for a minute. Command COM is an integral part of Windows operating system. It performs several different functions, blah, 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 great, interesting stuff. Now, I want you to all kill command COM. I want you to stop that process. Kill command COM. Ready, go. You got 10 minutes. So all the students run over their machines and they bring up the processes. They try and kill command COM. Like, okay, what happens? Like, oh, we killed it. Show me. It's not there anymore. CMD, still there, buddy. You can't kill command COM without killing the entire system. Kernel, the system kernel is going to protect command COM because it's one of the kernel processes. And then we can get into privilege escalation and things like that. But just something as simple as killing command COM or overloading Windows of the processes. How does Windows protect itself? Linux. How can you kill sudo? Can you kill su? Well, it depends on the version of Linux and things like that. But we can branch off from basic questions like that into all kinds of different areas of privilege escalation, kernel protection, and things like that, and whatnot. But the big takeaway is why Hacker High School is different from everybody else. And I'd like to finish up with just showing you. Here's our card. Now, if you notice, a lot of cybersecurity companies out there, you've got their Thunder Warrior or Cyber Kill Chain. They have these really very barbaric terms for it. Oh my God, attack analysis. And what do we have? We have a little girl holding a butterfly. So Hacker High School, we think of security differently than everybody else in the industry does. We're not militarizing security. We're saying let's think about this in a different way because what we're doing isn't working. It's never worked. So why isn't it working? And that's what we explain with Hacker High School. And that's one of the big reasons why we're targeting teens, because they aren't jaded. They haven't been through all those courses and don't have the certifications to say, you must think this way. We've got their brains and we can mold them and say, question everything. And that's one of the big takeaways we want from our students is we want them to question everything. When they walk into their first job interview, I want them to question, why is your firewall configured that way? Why is your server set up that way? Why is this? Why is that? And I just question and be curious throughout your entire life.
That's awesome. I just immediately think of my four-year-old. But why? But why?
Exactly.
Exactly. So yeah, those are really good examples. Actually, that's really awesome. I really like the light bulb metaphor. I think that you've drawn it in a very so I think it's one of my favorite quotes from Einstein. I think he said, if you can't explain a subject simply, you do not know it well enough. So you certainly seem to have some grasp on that. I'm really excited about the stuff with your courses. So I think we're hitting the appropriate time spot. We're kind of back on sync here. Do you have more for us? We're kind of loose and flexible with the time zone because we promised folks that we'd have 3.5 hours here, and I think we have plenty of time. So if I don't want to cut you off prematurely. So
we really appreciate you having us, and for allowing us to be part of your organization, and for this event.
I think that the example with the bird and the girl is on the card is a brilliant metaphor, and I think one of the reasons we get along so well, because we're always about, our thing over here is about being about communication and the dissemination of information and getting people together through information. And I think that getting young kids involved in that is a huge piece of this. As I said to you earlier, and I've said this to all the folks there, is that this is a religious thing with me. I think that we really need to focus on one of our greatest sort of jobs as we grow older and we become more experienced and knowledgeable, is we have to become mentors for the younger generations coming up. So I think this is a great opportunity. Let's see if we've got some folks here. We still have some folks on the stream events, but we've had a few new folks roll into the panels. So let's allow folks to talk here and see if they have any questions. I think that's everybody, or if there's anything in the chat. So any questions for Bob here and about Hacker High School? I've asked you all my questions. I'm trying to think. I'm in the funny position on this one, is because I'm thinking about getting my oldest son to join this particular group. I think this course would be excellent for him. So I'm trying to think what. So I got one question for you. Are there any sort of prerequisites? Obviously the folks coming will need an internet link, and they're going to be talking to you remotely. But do they need any sort of equipment at home? Are there any sort of things? Most of the things, you have some demos, or what kind of they probably will need some kind of either Discord or the Zoom account. They probably need an email address. What are the requisites on the parent side for equipping their kids for this course?
Well, one of the Pete approached me about this a couple of years ago, and he said, Bob, we are trying to teach all the teams around the world. We're not just focused on any particular country. We're trying to teach everybody around the world, all the teams around the world. And he said, what are we going to do about those teams that are in countries that don't have access to constant electricity, or don't have access to laptops for every student? So I said, okay, Pete, we can solve this. This is doable. So what I did is I start researching single board computers like the Raspberry Pi. There's a lot of single board computers out there that are available. The Raspberry Pi Zero is $15, depending on where you buy it. But this little device right here is a full-blown computer. It's got the USB ports on it, got HDMI out. It's got a 40-pin GPIO header, and it can run off a 4-pack of AA batteries for about 19 hours. It has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built into it. So for those countries and those places that don't have the resources and tools we need, we can teach all of our Hacker High School lessons just on one of these devices here. You don't need this big server and big war room or anything like that. And our lessons are available for free for download. You can just go on our website, hackerhighschool.org, pick the language you want to learn in. We have several different languages that we're translated into. Grab the lesson, read it, go through the exercises. For the parents out there that have questions, read the lesson ourselves. See what we're talking about. If it makes sense to you, then hand it off to your team. If your team wants to continue it, be my guest. We'd love to have you on board. But it doesn't take a tremendous amount of technology or money or resources. It just requires somebody to be curious.
I'm super bullish about Raspberry Pis. I just pulled this out from over beside my desk. There's a Raspberry Pi. I've got a LED shield on it for the back, and this is the official Pi touchscreen. It's super easy. I think this whole thing costs less than $70 when you put it together. It's you get so much computers in a Raspberry Pi. I think it's become it is the world's biggest selling computer ever. It's become ubiquitous, and you've got so much power in there. Something actually we'll take offline, but I think one of the things we should think about is trying to find a really affordable Raspberry Pi kit, and we'll put in options that we can have find someone to drop ship them to the students so that if that might be an option for the folks who are just getting in the course. I don't know if because knowing that you're going to base a lot of equipment on a lot of stuff on Raspberry Pi and Linux stuff, I think that most kids I would hope these days, especially if they're doing a lot of online stuff, would have access to some kind of computing platform you can run that on. So that doesn't seem like a particularly high bar. I think that sounds good.
No, and that's the point. Is again, you don't need a lot. I mean, as long as you can get a Linux Raspbian or something to run on one of these small devices, it's not a big investment. Granted, for us, $15 doesn't mean much, but other people around the world, that $15 could be a lot of money. But it's a lot less of an investment than having to go out and buy a bunch of laptops for everybody when you can't do that.
So here's a question, and I know we'll take this offline. I'm kind of brainstorming and ad lib as we go here, because really it's the first time we've got jumped into this. But one of the things we can maybe talk offline is about maybe providing a cloud instance and with the course or during this, so that people can SSH into it. I think that.
Yeah.
So, so if we set up a VM and we just give them, hey, here's a login, and while you have this course, you can have access to this cloud instance during the week of the course, so you can kick tires on it and do stuff. That might be I think there's some interesting and fun stuff we could do there. As I said, I'm really excited about this. I look forward to working with you guys to tweak the aspects of this and to make this more useful for kids. I think I was talking to some folks from France. I've been trying for a decade to try to get more kids, and we tried last year. So one of the things that didn't happen this year is we had a high school student who actually submitted a technical paper about vulnerabilities that actually got accepted from Korea. It was a brilliant kid, and this was like he'd already found 4 bugs and won 4 bug awards between all this. And we were going to fly him, but the pandemic happened, and it was like there's a lot of brilliant and talented kids out there, and I think that more vehicles to reach them are a really good thing. So and any questions? Okay. Let's see. Somebody loves the light bulb, but yeah, it was a really, really great way to explain that metaphor, and it's simple, approachable, and makes it really, really graspable. So yeah, if you guys have more material like that, I think this will be a great big hit. I'm really excited.
We got lots of exercises. We got lots of fun stuff to do.
Cool.
Wait till you get into us breaking windows. Oh, that's a lot of when we do the soup can comms, that is so cool. 2 soup cans with a string, and we try and secure it.
Cool. I like that. I love this stuff. This sounds great. I'm really excited to have you guys on board.
Thank you.
Which is kind of a perfect lead up. Let's promote the panelist, our next gentleman, who is Mr. Rob Shane. And let's see, he's a panelist. Okay, he's up here. So let's give one last call for questions, if in the chat or anything we're in the audience. So thanks, Bob. I really, really look forward to working with you on this project. I think that.
So do I. We really appreciate you having us. Thank you.
Let's see if we're gonna ask Rob to start his video, and we'll keep folks entertained. I mean, there's Rob. Hey. So speaking of education, Rob meet Bob. I think that both of you are obviously very talented educators, and I was singing to Bob the praises of your course, because I just know the snippets of stuff you've given, like when you showed up at Meta Virtual ConCon, and the stuff you've got some really, really good tools in terms of online training, and I think some of that stuff's getting much more important. So I think that hopefully the two of you have some conversation offline, because I think you have some.
That'd be great.
So maybe I'll say bye to Bob, and have a nice rest of your day in Hawaii. And
thank you. It's always nice here.
We'll switch horses now. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
I realized I was on mute. Hi, Bob. Bye, Bob.
Okay. All right. Hey, Rob. How's it going?
It's going well.
Let's see. And thanks for all the juggling and last minute scheduling.
Oh, no worries. It's all good.
It's all. So the people who are watching are now going to be able to predict my questions because they've seen me do it twice. So I have to try to inject some freshness in it. But
Gonna get me to think of my feet, huh?
oh yeah, but I'm still
good.
trying to get the same base level of information. I mean, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you wound up being an instructor. And I know you have a long and illustrious history with the source conferences, and you're a dinosaur like me. So I don't know. Tell the folks for the website a little bit about yourself, sir.
All right, cool. So I have in my career been both a builder and a breaker. I started out in my career. Actually, it was funny. I was listening to you guys talk about the Kernighan and Ritchie book. That was my Bible back in the day. I started out as a C programmer, and that shifted into systems integration. And that eventually got me a gig working at a company that was building secure web servers. And that kind of got me from the building side eventually into the breaker side. And, over, a few years of doing that, I would, when teaching the stuff. And I proceeded to do death by PowerPoint. And
I don't know what just happened there.
Are you good?
Oh, it's mine.
Can you hear me?
Apparently it says my connection is unstable, but let's, you know what? Sorry for interruption. Just launched in. I thought it might have been your connection, but it's apparently something here, some kind of hiccup. Okay, it's back. Oh well.
All right, as long as we're good. So basically I started teaching this stuff and started, doing the death by PowerPoint thing that a lot of people do. And at some point I started taking, outside of work, I started taking professional train the trainer courses and really digging in and wanting to get good at this stuff. Because, in the early days I would show up and people would write in my feedback forms, don't send technical people to be trainers. And I think a lot of people run into that because they send the smart guy in the room up to present some information and they think that they can just wing it, or they think that they can, because they're good at the technical elements, they might be good also at the presenting of it. And those usually are different skill sets that need to be worked on. So I kind of really dug deeply into that. And at this point, I've been teaching this material. I thought about it today because I knew I was going to talk about it. I started teaching fully around 2004. So, at this point, I've got about 16, 17 years of experience of being in front of the room, being online, just talking to people and communicating thoughts. And, I noticed earlier, you guys made the comment, I make a note with Einstein that you can't explain a topic clearly that you don't know it well enough. And I completely agree with that. And I would add that teaching is the highest form of mastery. So if you can really, really teach something well, this idea that if you can't, those that can do teach and those that can't, or those that can do and those that can't teach, I think that's nonsense really, because those that can teach well, it brings to a whole nother level of understanding of the topic for yourself as well as for other people. So that's a little bit about my background. Anything you want to dive in on there?
I was actually just busy message. No, you should be able to hear me now, right? Yes, you can. Mm-hmm. So I was just messaging Jay, telling him that we're kind of going on schedule because he's got a little his daughter that he's got to put down to bed before he can join us. So I was
got it.
giving him a heads up. So
I know that drill.
I'll ask you to record the story because I think it's just a good thing to tell people about. So tell the story of how Source Conference got started, because I think that's probably where people most know you from. And
sure,
So regale us with a tale, Uncle Rob.
So it kind of involved a few timelines converging at once. So At Stake eventually got bought by Symantec, and then I stuck around there for a couple of years because I had just started teaching and I wanted to keep teaching because I was enjoying it and I was still learning a lot and I was having fun with it. And I was getting to travel around the world and go to cool places. I went to China 4 times teaching this stuff. But somewhere along the way, I started to get a little, disenchanted with working for big company and wanted to start my own thing. And I had just started my own company called SafeLight. It was focused entirely on security education. And right around that same time period, a bunch of my friends from the AtStake days and the early hacking days decided they wanted to start a conference. So we all kind of got together and we started working on it. So that was back in 2007. And it was people, you know, Stacy was the original founder, Stacy Rue, and her husband, who's well-known, Dill Dog. And it was literally the initial set of advisors was kind of like the who's who of people that were in InfoSec at the time. And I don't want to forget a name, so I'm not going to bother listing them all out because I will forget somebody. But it was a pretty solid list. It was a lot of fun people. And the first couple of years, we just really had a blast with it. And then over the years, it just kind of kept going. And we've had, you know, in many ways, the who's who of security people on our stage talking about stuff. There's been a lot of great talks. And it's always been kind of this, you know, balance of business and security. So we wanted to have, you know, not just be deep technical talks, but also be a place where people could come together and share, you know, not just, you know, sales pitches or, you know, high level stuff, but actual like case studies. And I love business case studies on security stuff. It's great. And that just evolved over the years. And then in, I forget the year, around 2014, I think, Stacy and Chris decided to move away and have kids. And they were like, well, we don't really want this thing anymore. Do you want it? And I said, yes. So I took it over and kind of folded it into my next company that I was working on. And kind of the rest is history. I've just been continuing to put it on, and we've run it in different cities. It's been run in Boston. It's been run in Dublin. It's been run in Seattle. It's been run in Arizona. It's been run in, you know, a whole variety of places. So, but, you know, more recently, we've been shifting to an online model, obviously with the COVID thing, you know, that kind of messed up my plans for having in-person events for this year. So, you know, we're online, and but we did one this year. You actually attended some of it. So, so you were there for fun. I had a lot of fun with that one. That was great. We're going to do another one in December. So there's going to be some stuff coming out about that very soon. But yeah, that's kind of
sign me up.
The short version. All right, man. Cool.
You know, so I think there's certainly some awkward things breaking through the barrier, trying to get interplay here, and communication is a little bit of a different dance in the Zoom, but there's I think lots of opportunity for that interaction to happen in ways that we can't do in real life. So I think I'm a little bit worried and excited about being forced to do a lot of online stuff, because the big question is, I mean, right now we've pivoted for our Tokyo conference. Will we be able to go to Tokyo next November?
Right.
That, I mean, our March, we're going to be doing CanSecWest, which is going on. It's just like you're a dinosaur like me in terms of conference organizing. We've had the who's who traipsing through our stages. We kind of know everybody, and it's the question, what we do next year and when will things go through. That's the $1 million question. I'm rolling up my sleeves because it's going to be a long haul virtually, but I'm desperately hungry for the next chance we get to go have a beer in person, or to have some people go skiing at Whistler after the conference. All these things that are, I'm sitting on a bunch of conference cabin credits from last year that are already paid. And I'm wondering, when are we going to finally be able to do that stuff? So
if Canada lets me back in and come in March, I'm interested.
Dude. There's a bedroom in a cabin after the Whistler conference waiting for you, because I would love to be able to sit at night and we'll swap war stories.
That seems to be what happens when the dinosaurs get together. There ends up being some geek out around old technology.
I don't know. I think that we accumulate lots of fun stories over the while, which I'm going to use as segue to get back into to your course, because I think one of the things that you've learned some real good tricks, and I've learned some things about, even with 20 years of being in front of a crowd and being a conference organizer. Just talking to you, I learn every time I talk to you, which I am kind of excited about your course. I think that you have some good material. Tell me a little bit about who's the typical person who finds value out of your course, and what's your student look? Who are the folks who should look at being students in your class?
Right. So the course is InfoSec Train the Trainer, and with emphasis on the train the trainer part. And really the way the course came about in the first place, if I just rewind for just a little bit, most of what I was teaching, since 2004 was, developer training. So I was getting to go and teach the stuff that we know to people that aren't like us. So people that are normally just trying to build systems and keep them secure. So I had a manager's course, I have a developer's course, a threat modeling course, the usual kind of stuff. But one of the things I kind of noticed repeatedly was that I had over time was starting to develop some superpowers that I know for sure other people don't have, because I see the way people still give presentations. So I really wanted to build a course that would help address that, because, I'm a dinosaur. I'm not going to be doing this forever. And I, eventually want to be able to hand over some of the cool things I've learned here. So really the course is meant for anybody that wants to learn and grow and take their game to the next level. Because in my opinion, communication is the highest game. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and done, consulting or training, or one of my favorite classes to teach is my threat modeling course, because I basically have them bring a mixed group of people in the room, the trainer, the managers, the executives, the developers, the architects, the QA people, all in the same place. And I get them to talk to each other. And inevitably, what I've learned consistently over and over and over again is that communication is always the biggest problem. And it's usually because someone's not bridging the gap between the security people and the technical people and the business people and the security people. And there's this trifecta of pain that occurs between all these various groups, and they're all speaking a different language, specifically different vocabulary, different acronyms, different things they care about. And being able to easily kind of, flip between those mindsets and know that, if you want to communicate, it's about reaching out to the other person as much as it is getting them to reach out to you. Just little things like that, and that I really want to communicate. So really I would say, yes. So I would say, anybody that's in IT, anybody, I've had InfoSec professionals that come to the course, project managers, speakers and trainers, either both folks that are just starting out with presentations or people that have been doing it for a very long time. Because, we've all worked on different things. I still myself go out and invest money and time on taking train the trainer classes and taking other kinds of extracurricular training. So, we all can learn something new every time. I usually when I'm up on a stage, I'll, demonstrate like a karate block or something like that, because I've done a lot of martial arts. And I like to use the metaphor that, every time you hear something or, try to practice it again, it's like practicing that block, which makes it that much more likely that it'll actually work in a real situation. So, it's really anybody that wants to just take their communication game to the next level is the kind of the long-winded answer there.
Oh, I think so. I've said all along that our core mission here is communication, and you're absolutely right. I say another little catchphrase. We're all kind of like sharks, and when we stop learning, that's when we start declining. Yep. I intend to be learning like a little child until I'm as old as possible, because I love learning. And little things like about communications, you can literally hypnotize people with just your voice, right? You can do things by just pacing, and there's all kinds of communication skills. So give us some examples of a few takeaways that folks are gonna have from your course, and okay. Give me a little flavor.
All right, cool. So basically, one thing that's important is I do tailor the course to whoever's in the room, and I start off the session by asking them, what do you guys want to get out of this? Because what I don't want to do is sit and teach, a bunch of stuff that's on my list if they have things that they want to know about. So again, part of the value of coming to a course for me is that I've got a bunch of years of experience, not just in training, but also consulting and, a whole bunch of other things. So, but if I can basically understand where are you at right now, what do you want to get through, then we can, tailor the course to that. But, some of the common things people want to do is, how to answer questions in front of a room, like, especially when they're hard questions, how do you, when you have that person in the room is trying to stump you or look smart or whatever, how do you deal with those situations? So we definitely talk a lot about that. A big part of my focus is keeping students engaged. because, and I'll give you a little taste of content in a few minutes and we'll talk about this, but basically, one of the hardest things to do is keeping other human beings paying attention while you're speaking, right? Because if you don't do that, the opposite of that is what? Well, they're drooling on their desk, or they're looking at their phone, or they're doing something else that's not, I'm doing what, fidgeting all over the place. And if you notice that someone's doing that, you as an instructor have failed. It's partly on them, but it's just as much on you, because if you're being truly engaging and really, really drawing them in, then they will be engaged 99% of the time. And I definitely have a mantra, no student left behind. And I make sure that everybody plays for that when we do the practice sessions. And we do have a lot of practice sessions. There's a lot of interactivity here. The nice thing about this one, this is a special version of the course. It's a 4-day version. And the 2-day version, we do some exercises, but we can go a lot deeper on actual practice over the 4 days. So by the time you walk away, you're going to really not just mentally know stuff, but you're going to more deeply, have done it. And that's one of the big differences between, learning to know versus learning to do. And we're going to be learning to do in this class. So those are a few things. But again, like I sometimes have people say, how do I convince people that security is important? Boy, do I have a session for you. Because I definitely think of it a little bit like social engineering, and I teach people essentially how to social engineer a room to care about security. So that one thing is probably worth the price of the course, because that's hard to do.
I think we need to, so one of the things I find, especially with the Zoom courses and online, is I think we've already kind of made the decision. We're going to try to ask the students to keep their cameras on to give the feedback to the instructor. Yep. And I mean, that, I know even now, just when we're in a person Zoom with 2 people, just when you're talking by yourself and I fade out, it's much easier when you've got the other person there, and the reactions and the feedback for the instructor to understand, are you really connecting with that student? And I think that some of the things that the connections you're making with your students will be good. So you said you had some examples. The one of the things that were my normal shtick here, and it's my questions, is what are the prerequisites for this course? But I don't want to give an opportunity for another person to use the pulse joke, because of the last few guys were like, well, you have to have a pulse. So with apologies to the previous instructor, not ridiculing them, but I think that your course lends itself to a very, very broad PLI. I think that of all the courses that we put on, we haven't had one that's quite this sort of mass market. In my opinion, everybody needs to have that. That
I would love it if everybody in the industry took my course, just from the point of view of getting the content out there.
I would love it if some of the people who submit to our CFPs take your course, so that they can be more effective communicators in their everyday presentations. Because we see a lot of people who are technical and who don't understand that, a little bit of knowledge about the educational aspects of delivering material can really make a huge difference in terms of just the engagements and in that audience. And plus, people will. I think when people are more engaged, they will remember it more. You're becoming a better educator. It'll lead to career advancement. There's so many areas that I think that taking your course will really help folks with. So I won't ask you the prerequisite question.
Well, it's probably not too surprising that as someone who runs another conference, I built the course for those guys that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So
I specifically built it for the people that present, because I want to up the game. I want people to give better content, because it's not just about showing up and doing your slide deck, right? If that's all you're doing when you're showing up at a conference to speak, in my opinion, you're doing it wrong. What are you trying to get them? Here's a little tip. What do you want them to think, do, or feel at the end of your talk? Somebody taught me that 10 plus years ago, and I've been using as a mantra every single time I give any kind of talk or presentation, or even a little interview like this. Like, what do I want them to think, do, or feel when they come away from what I just said? And if you, just by asking yourself that question, you can easily boil down and eliminate all the things that don't matter from your content. Because I can tell the people that don't do that, because if I'm sitting there going like this partway through, it's because they didn't do that. And it's not like people tell you this stuff very often. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know either until someone told me that, you know.
It's funny you should say that, because I've thought about doing that kind of a training. I almost went and did that kind of a training thing, because you really see that. You wish you could make the instructors kind of go through some basic stuff, you know.
Yep.
And I'm not denigrating the folks who present, because you get some
no,
folks who are slick, who've been doing it for years, and who are very just instinctive educators. But then you also get the folks who are so technically brilliant, they have a difficulty communicating some of that brilliance. And I think that being able to apply that brilliance through communication training is very, very valuable.
One of the things, I love it when people like that are in the room. And what I try to do in those situations is I have a little session that I call explain yourself. And I'll be like, tell me how encryption works. Tell me how public key encryption works. And I'll have them just explain it, or explain to me how, you know, TCP/IP works. Just something that I know that they know about, that I know enough about myself that I can have a conversation about it. And usually it's some topic that I also teach about in one of my classes. So I've kind of had to do this work myself, and I'll have them do it. And you know, it's amazing. Some of the smartest people just cannot get the words out of their mouth to explain something in a way that another person could understand it. They clearly get it. They clearly know how it works, but being able to actually explain it so that other people can get it. And that actually goes right into a little sample of content. And you can probably hear my cat meowing in the background.
It's okay. Yeah.
So we have a little friend that's meowing for us. Yeah.
I've been very lucky. My cat's usually meowing at me for food, and she's.
That's what mine's doing right now.
Okay, but I'm eagerly awaiting the content. So
it's time for the late night snack. Yeah. Anyway, all right. So let's just start with something simple. What I often will have them do, like whether it's oh, by the way, just one little quick thing. I also actually, for this class that I'm going to be doing, I want them to have the camera on, and I'll actually probably kind of insist on it, because for this kind of class, you need to be able to visually connect with people. You can't just tune out and have it be a blank screen. It doesn't work that way. I've done some of these sessions online, and when you have the ability to look the other person essentially virtually in the eye, like I'm doing to you right now, you can tell if someone's getting something or not. And if they're not, you can ask a follow-up, or they can, you know, whatever. And again, because this is a communications course, we really want to foster all of the best practices there. So for my class, I'm going to insist upon it, and it'll be worthwhile to do it that way. So here's a little exercise that is a classic public speaking exercise that some of you might have seen, maybe not. But think of, I'm going to say a word, and I just want you to pay attention to what pops in your head. So the word is apple. So just think about it. Now, Dragos, I have you on the call, so I can ask you, what did you think of when you?
Microsoft.
You thought of Microsoft. That's interesting. So I actually thought of a red apple, like a red delicious apple. It's just like the one that pops into my head when I think of the word apple. But I've done this with a zillion people, and I can tell you, if you do this with 100 people, you're probably going to get 100 different answers. And you get everything from Apple Computers, Apple Music Company, the flavor of an apple, apple pie. Everybody's got a different thing that comes up when they hear the word apple. Now, that's a really simple word, right? It's a really simple word. Yet just that simple word, it's all over the place how people choose to interpret it. And they don't even realize they're doing it. It's all happening unconsciously. So a lot of what we talk about, especially in the foundation laying portion of the course, is understanding the psychology in the inner world of the people you're presenting to, because that's important. Because if we have that many different variations on what's going to come up when you say the word apple, imagine how many variations you're going to get when you ask somebody about public key encryption, or TCP/IP, or session management, or any number of technical terms that we throw around like nothing, like they're candy. Just here you go, you know, TCP/IP, you know. So once you know that, you can't forget that was a thing. You're like, all right, now it's your responsibility as the instructor to, in spite of that, figure out creative ways to make sure that you're understood. Now, this is compounded by another problem, which is, and I'm going to introduce you to somebody right now that you may or may not know. It is your little voice, right? It's a little voice. It's always chattering to you all the time. And as humans, we subvocalize. We learn to subvocalize when we're children, when we start to read, but then we continue to do it. We kind of talk to ourselves. And it doesn't mean you're crazy, perfectly normal thing to do. Everybody does it at least a little bit. And those of you, when I'm in a class, I always make the joke, if right now, just sitting there, you go, I don't have a little voice. It was that was your little voice. That's it. That's the one. Capture that, pay attention to that. So everybody's got one. Everybody's got one. So the important thing to know is you as the instructor have one. And there are times where, the other thing to know is the little voice is kind of driven by your amygdala in many ways. So your amygdala is the part of your brain that controls it's your lizard brain. It controls your fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms in your body. So your little voice goes through that filter first, unfortunately, which is annoying. But the more you're aware of that, the more you can kind of deal with it. But, a good example of when that might come up is when you first start out at the beginning of the day. That's where everybody's the most uncomfortable. The students are the most uncomfortable. The instructor is the most uncomfortable because you don't know anybody. You're wondering about if they're going to have any glitches, any technical issues. Are you going to remember what you were going to talk about? All little voice stuff that comes up, right? So managing that little voice becomes a really integral part of communicating well. And I almost never hear anybody talk about this stuff because I didn't learn about this stuff in a train the trainer class or in any technical class. I did a whole bunch of personal development work and all other kinds of trainings and things that I've learned and practiced this stuff over many years. So I try to incorporate that kind of stuff too, because it's really important because every single person sitting in your class has a little voice. They all have an amygdala. A good example of that was when I first started teaching, actually, I had a gig where I had to train like 3,500 people in a year for the same company. And we had to do it in like 1.5 hour sessions. It was basically an entire IT division of a company needed to basically come up to speed very quickly on some basics. So we had a quick little overview session, and it wasn't really a deep dive. It wasn't meant to be. It was really meant to make them aware. It was that level of training. And in one of the sessions, I was mentioning something about one of their firewall configurations that I happened to know about, where I knew that they needed an extra firewall in a particular place, so they could, have better monitoring, a little bit better protection. Obviously, it wasn't going to protect against everything, but I was still new at the training thing. And I just started launching into, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. And at some point, this guy in the third row back from the audience, like 150 person room, raises his hand and goes, "You're wrong." I'm like, what? I was like so taken aback because I had already done a bunch of these sessions and I'd never had it. They all went off without a hitch. And this guy was just like, "You're wrong." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And like, what's the, and then it turned into like this debate. This, like, you never, ever, ever as the instructor ever want to be in a debate with a student in front of 150 people. Because what happened to the rest of them? They're all just tuning out. They're annoyed. I see people rolling their eyes. I'm like, how do I get myself out of this situation as quickly as possible now? So I ended up, after, making the rookie mistake of engaging that conversation, eventually I had to take, I'd be like, all right, we're gonna have to take that one offline and just be aware that, it is best practice. It is, the right thing to do, but we'll have to, if you have any further questions, we're going to have to talk about it after because we don't have much time. So here's what's interesting. Isn't that happened? It's how I fixed it. How I fixed it I happened upon this a little bit by accident, but then I kind of dug into it to understand why it worked. So here's what I did. The very next time I taught that session, right before I got to the point where I knew there could be an objection, I inserted the following couple sentences. I said, look, the thing I'm about to tell you might sound a little bit controversial. It might sound ridiculous. It might sound hard to do, but I assure you it's best practice. And it gives you the ability to do extra monitoring, and it does make you more secure. And that was it. That's the only extra content I added. The whole rest of my content, I did exactly the same. I never, ever, ever got that complaint again. And I had gotten variations of it before, just not as strongly as that. I never got the complaint again. And really what I was doing back then, and I learned later why it worked. I was basically injecting a little bit of a social engineering hack into the content. I basically was doing a little amygdala massage, like, it's going to be okay. I know it might be hard. Because it turns out the guy that was objecting, it was his job to do it, and he didn't want to look bad. He didn't want to have to do the work or whatever it was. So that was the real reason. I found that out after the fact. So you just kind of, it's going to be all right. I know it seems like, and these are the kind of things that a lot of technical people don't do naturally because it never occurred to you. Because it's like, well, just know the content and that's all that matters. But it's not just about the content. Context is everything. Context is so much more valuable than content. When I learned this, I actually drilled down and really boiled away to the essential content and spent a lot more time setting context so that people would actually take away the things I was teaching them. Because I would rather, if I had to, teach 10% of the material and have 90% of the people retain 90% of it, than teach 90% more material and have only 10% people get it. Right? So again, in these sessions that I run, I teach you how to engage the entire room in a way that's effective and in a way that everybody follows along, and that you can tell an entire story arc over the time period of your training or your course or your presentation. And you can make sure that they all follow along and arrive with you at that think, do, or feel that you wanted them to get to. And it's just, there's a whole bunch of little tips and tricks that I've picked up over many years of doing this that I just now, this is a nice, convenient way for me to have an excuse to share all these things. Because normally you'd have to buy me a beer somewhere and, we'd have to just, BS around the bar about, various things we've learned. But I designed the course so you could just kind of pick my brain. And I started out, it's got a solid structure to start with, but if you have specific things you want to learn, we just adapt. So.
I think it's funny because it takes a long time. I think that there's a real value in distilling some of those lessons. It takes you quite a while. I mean, I when you were telling me that story, I was thinking the same thing. It took me like 5 years of presenting in front of crowds before I realized, hey, you've got the mic. There's no way anyone can hassle you as long as you have. As long as you have the mic,
that is correct.
And it's funny as you say about the being engaged. I share a little story with you. So way back when I started going back to Japan in the 90s, and one of the things that was very sort of culture. I know you've done some training. I think you've done some training in Japan, but
Japan, China. I've been to China 4 times.
China. So, well, one of the things that's weird about Japan is it's perfectly acceptable for folks to fall asleep in the meeting. If you've had a rough night, people will just like, they'll doze out. So I was giving a presentation. I was over there showing a new communications analyzer for HP. And so there was a guy in my presentation in the front row who's like asleep, just like he's out. He's like right out. And I found myself I started ignoring the rest of the audience, exactly this scenario. And I was like presenting to this one guy. I wanted him to wake up because he was sitting there asleep, but I was trying, and it was kind of like, I had to pull that back. I was like, okay, what am I doing here? Hey, there's lots of other people here in this room. This one guy was like getting inside my head, and I needed that little amygdala rub lesson from you. If I would have had that ahead of time, I wouldn't have fallen into that presentation trap there. So I think that's a pretty good story.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean that happens a lot of times. Even when people are just asked a hard question, the same thing happens. They engage so intently with the one person that they lose the rest of the audience. So that's definitely a practiced skill. But part of it is just knowing that, like being aware of the fact that you can't just engage with the one person. You got to make sure that you're still engaged with the entire room or with the entire Zoom call or whatever it is, and not just focusing on the one person that's mentally giving you a problem, because it's mostly just you mentally having the problem versus, it actually being a problem most of the time.
So, I'm gonna you've given us a really good example of kind of the things and areas you focus on. Do you have some more little can bits? I mean, maybe some examples of powerful takeaways or of that people can take from your course in terms of, have you seen do you have some good success stories, some folks you've seen who've been really sort of awkward to begin with, that flower after your material?
I think one of my favorite, just off the top of my head, and I won't say who it was, but I did have somebody do my course, and then later, it was a while later too, just suddenly one day I was CC'd on a tweet or something that said, hey, I just got my talk accepted to Black Hat. Yay. And so I was like, yeah, good. You're actually, taking it on. And this person had never spoken at a conference before. So that was kind of an exciting win for me. I was just excited for them as much as anything. I just, because again, part of what I'm trying to do here is just make people better communicators. And part of it being a better communicator is just making people more self-aware as well of just, their own inner voice and things like that. So all of those things are just good life skills I'm just trying to impart. So when I get little wins like that, where someone had a success out of it, I'm like, yes, go for it. As far as what's that?
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I have something I'm gonna ask you, but
ask away. I'm just, this is just going to be us babbling now.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. So, I basically, I'm still trying to think of what we can tell folks to characterize your training. I mean, it sounds like it's very individualized coaching, that you really you're kind of responsive, and it's the best kind of coaching you've ever done. I mean, I'll share a story with you again from. I went through a similar kind of communications training way back when in the 90s from an old CBC radio announcer. And if I look back of all the training courses I've ever had and all the things that have that was been the single most useful thing that I've ever taken as a course. I was real skeptical going in. It's like, oh, who needs training courses? I mean, why do I need to train people? I mean, I'm a product manager for a fiber optics communications analyzers. I don't need to train people. There's support engineers and things that do things like that. And over my life, now 30 years later or whatever after that, I think back of all the things, the skills that have been most useful to me. You always need to communicate to people, and that kind of training, I think, really has the value. And if I can give you an perspective from somebody else outside of your course, I think that folks really need to understand that just how many areas of their life powering up your communication skills can really enable.
Yeah, there's an old saying that how you are in one thing is how you are in everything. And if you really take that on, and I have taken that on in my, I just, everything is self-reflective, right? So if you take on a course like this and really dive in and spend 4 days immersing yourself, it's a combination. You'll notice I didn't get up here and do a bunch of PowerPoint slides because I don't do death by PowerPoint. And, in the online course, I'll do a little bit more of, I'll probably type some things in the virtual whiteboard or maybe write things on a whiteboard. But for this, I just wanted to chat. And a lot of the content is that, but there is, things that I want people to write down and do. And so it's an interactive course in that you'll be hearing some content from me, but then I'll have you do some exercises and then to practice some of the things that we learn. So there's a thing called Bloom's taxonomy. So I'm just rambling now, but Bloom's taxonomy. I
don't know it. Tell me more about it. I don't know.
So it's something that I learned about when I first built a training company, and because every training course you had to know, where on the Bloom's taxonomy do you fall, and basically level 1 is just awareness of the information, and then it goes from there. It's like awareness, and then there's being able to understand it, and then actually able to do it, and then at some point there's able to teach it, and then able to create new content of your own. So it's this whole level of where are you trying to get them
sophistication to
in your training courses. So in that regard, for something like this, I really want people to walk away being better communicators, and that as you said, that'll follow along with you outside of just, do I have to give a training? Do I have to give a presentation? You might have to on the fly, give a random off the cuff speech. Maybe you're at a wedding and someone asked you to give a toast, or maybe you just need to, maybe you're just trying to have a better communication with your spouse or your partner. All of that's communication. It's all the same kind of skills, right? So you might apply it in certain ways specifically. So, if you might ask, how would teaching someone how to do buffer overflows be the same thing as talking to my wife? It's like, well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. You just have to kind of adapt and know. But when you've practiced making yourself clearly understood, and you've practiced taking complex thoughts in your brain and getting them out into a form that you know makes sense to another human being. You can use that in so many different ways. You can use it when you're asking for a raise or promotion. You can articulate like, here's the value I provided in the last year. You can use it in all kinds of things. There's really like no end to it. Like one of the best things I ever did, and it was kind of accidental because I was one of those guys that I just get bored easily. So when I was back at AdStake, I started out doing architecture assessments because of my software development background. And then I started doing a little bit of pen testing, but more on the architecture side. But then I started doing a lot of design and code reviews. And then I just became the person doing that for a while. And then at some point, somebody asked me if I wanted to write the next version of Loftcrack. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And so I did that for a while. And then I'd kind of done all the things to do. And then so training was just kind of like the one big thing I hadn't done yet. But it was honestly probably the best career decision I ever made in my entire life, because being a professional trainer and being somebody who gets up in front of a room and speaks on a regular basis, it changes the way you think about a lot of things. It really, I'd have to spend 8 hours just talking to you about that. Like so many things in your life just transform when you speak for a living, because your natural mindset becomes, all right, I'm just gonna talk about this. It's like when you came on earlier today, we talked early in the afternoon, or I guess it was your morning probably, and you're like, hey, can you do this thing tonight? I'm like, yeah, sure, I could do this, because I have 6 hours to think about it. And I actually, you've seen me do this talk, I think, at Source. I do this little talk about how to give a lightning talk. And if you just that little trick, I usually teach that during the 4-day course, just because at some point it's good to know and how to structure a 4-minute talk as opposed to a 3-hour talk or a 3-day talk or something like that. So all of those things, like being able to like take any idea, like at this point, like you've even seen me do like my little fun thing I do at Source, which is I have everybody be a speaker at the end and we do little lightning talks on anything you want. And you've seen me do talks on bonsai trees, on speed solving the Rubik's Cube, and all these different kinds of things, because the formula applies, the lessons apply. And being able to do that is fun, because you can then, share the things that you know about in a way that other people get to experience it and enjoy it. So that's always fun for me.
You're preaching to the choir here too, because
I know.
I know. I mean, the powers. I use communication skills work when you're a parent. You're trying to help your kids do stuff. I mean, it lets they let you have confidence when you're jumping into a meeting, doing fundraising, applying for a loan, all kinds of things. The areas of life. It's really a skill that I can't stress enough, that I really, now you just have to go convince a lot of other folks that, hey, you really should go through this training, because I think that I get, like I said in the last talk about the cybersecurity for teams, this is one of those areas where it's a little bit religion. You need to know about this. We need to do this training. It's I think, and you can do it your way. I mean, the hard way, learn it, go through to be a trainer and make all the mistakes, or you can benefit from the wisdom of
that way. It takes almost 20 years.
yeah. I think that's about right. And I mean, I'm learning all the time too, and there's always little tricks that I'm going, hey, I should do that. But I think that it's pretty powerful, and so applied in so many ways. And that's, I guess, the message we'll have to stress to folks when they're watching the recordings of this, or the folks out there.
Awesome.
So
my goal is definitely to shortcut people's learning curve by at least 5 to 10 years, because there's a lot of things that took me a long time to figure out that I just know now. It's kind of like that old joke of, somebody's got a squeaky floor and he invites the carpenter, he tries to fix it himself and he can't do it. And then he invites this master carpenter to come over, and the guy takes his shoes off. He walks along the floor. He finds the squeak. He kind of presses this way, kind of presses that way. He takes out one nail and he bangs it to the floor, and the squeak's gone. And then he presents the guy with a bill for like, $500 or something like that. And he's like, $500, you just put one nail on the floor. He's like, all right, so I'll itemize it for you. It's like, one nail, $1. And, knowing where to put the nail, $499 is that kind of, and that kind of, having done the hard work, and now being able to be like, here's where you hit the nail. Here are some specific things you can work on. Because again, one of the, like you actually pointed out even before I did, one of the things I do actively in the course is coaching, in addition to just giving content. It's not just me talking for 4 days. It's me giving you content and exercises, but then actually having the students present to me and to the other audience members. So you get hands-on in a way that you don't get most other places for this kind of stuff. I don't know of anything like this in our space that anybody does. There's other deeper dive things you can do outside of InfoSec, but not in InfoSec tailored specifically to what we do. So it's kind of a special, unique course.
I really, that I got to stress that too, that practice and getting that somebody there to give you the feedback instantly. That's a really valuable exercise, because that's the one thing that, you can go back and look at yourself you can, on tape or whatever, but having somebody who knows, okay, hey, look, you're speaking in too monotone a voice, or any other the simple mistakes that so many of us make all the time. I think that those kinds of things are great when you have a coach that has been there, done that. I think that's probably one of the big values.
Well, even little things like, in Toastmasters, for example, like they count your ums and ahs when you go to a Toastmasters meeting if you're giving a talk. And the point of that is those are things you can't necessarily hear yourself doing unless you've trained yourself to pay attention. So having someone be able to be like, oh, no, you just said 20,000 ahs again. You got to stop that. Or, you're going straight down into the weeds on technical content. Like one of the things I often have them do is like, give me a technical demo of something. I'll teach you how to do a technical demo in a way that's not going to lose everybody. Because most people just go straight down into the weeds. They just assume everybody knows what they know. And I was actually hanging out the other night having a conversation with somebody super technical, not security person, just someone super, super technical. And he's like doing some hard chemistry stuff. And he just starts going down into atoms and electrons. And I had some background, so I was able to like kind of engage with him on the conversation. But like, if I didn't have that, I would have had no idea what he was talking about. But he was just into it. He was just going for it. And that's a common thing I see. People just, they don't kind of take the temperature of their audience or understand who their audience is before they just start launching into content. And so there's a lot of little tricks around how to set the context for any kind of session that just makes your session so much more likely to be successful. And that's one of those things, like that's just hard-earned knowledge that, I can teach you in 5 minutes and then it take you a couple days to practice it. And then you'll just know it. Or you can, grind it out and spend a bunch of time, doing it the hard way, like I did, brute force, because I can figure this out. I can do this, because I'm that guy. But, don't be like me and spend 15 years.
I think there's a lot of stuff though that is not immediately intuitive, because it takes, like you say, I think it takes quite a lot of experience before you realize that light bulb moment goes on. Whereas the power that a good instructor can do is they can short circuit that knowledge and get you there to that point, to that light bulb moment where and then teach you how to apply it, go through I love martial arts metaphors whenever we're talking about technical training, because there's so many, physical security models don't map well to virtual stuff here. But when we're talking about education and things like that, those kinds of metaphors I think martial arts instructors have to be very good teachers in a way if they're going to be very effective. So I look at a lot of that stuff. You can see that from go to the website. There's all this stuff in there that I was looking at when we first started setting up these courses. I looked at a lot of what martial arts instructors did and how they were effective in courses that are only taught a few times a year and those kinds of things. So I think that there's a lot of stuff there.
Well, with any learning that you do, you have to go through a process of a learning curve where you have to basically consume a bunch of content, but then you have to kind of process and assimilate and then filter, and then you learn a bunch more, and then you do that again. And after like several iterations of that, you now have enough content in your brain to be able to then assess that's why it takes 10 or 15. Like you can't just snap your fingers and just figure this stuff out without doing the work. So, and the work is it just takes time. It takes iterations. And like you said, like you can shortcut that time frame considerably by finding, like, if I want to learn how to do a new martial art, I'm going to go to someone that's actually already been doing that martial art for a long time, because I don't want the person that just read that guy's book and then they're teaching me from the book. Like I want to just go straight to the source, and no pun intended now that There really was no pun
Oh,
intended.
that was gross.
I wish I had done
Okay.
that on purpose, but but yeah, go straight to the
Maybe we
source.
can edit it so it'll see on purpose. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Go on.
However you want to edit it, it's fine. But yeah. So anyway, I definitely very much looking forward to teaching this. I really enjoy teaching even the 2-day versions of this course, but this is a special 4-day version where I really get to immerse myself with the students, and we get to really go deep and practice some stuff and really make some progress here. So, and if people have presentations or trainings that they've already, got content, bring that. If you want to work on that, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too, because we generate content in the course as well. So there's opportunity for both. And but I'll meet you wherever you're at, and then try to take your game to the next level.
I think that's awesome. We just have to let's work together and convey the value of that to folks, because the problem we have here is that you are preaching to the choir. We could both be babbling about this for a long time and do this. So we're actually pretty close to on schedule here, because we've got Jay's supposed to be showing up around 8 o'clock, and he's going to teach us some fun Kubernetes stuff. And let's don't want to cut you off prematurely. Any other things that you want to tell folks about your course before we go to some questions?
Those are the main points. I think I've kind of spoken a lot.
Yeah, I think we've
we've kind of covered the gist of what I was kind of
I think
cover. So
I feel comfortable that we've given a So let's see. We got questions here. Let's see, folks. Any questions? With that, let's
see any.
I don't see any either. So I know that I guess we've been doing an effective job of communicating. So
there you go.
Let's see. I'll give you some draft edits of what we're going to put on the website here. We'll promote John to a panelist here and invite him on. So with that, I'll thanks Rob, and appreciate the flexibility and giving us the overview there. That was awesome. I think we got some good stuff. As I said, I know the value of your course. I'm gonna try to shovel as many people into it, because people need to do this for their life. Hello, Mr. Bambenek.
Good evening, everybody.
All right, take it easy.
Bye, Rob. Hey, how's life? Are little ones down and everything sorted out over there?
Yeah, the little ones are down. Do this and then chase the older ones to bed.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I have a teenage son that likes to stay up all night playing video games, even when he's got to go to school early. That's one of our challenges over here. But maybe that's TMI,
That's parenting, right? The gift that keeps on taking.
I'm so gonna steal that line. That's brilliant, actually. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. So it's the most rewarding of all things. So so I think I gave you the heads up. We know you've already recorded some of this for me. but we might as well take another cut. Tell me, John, how I can't. We've been working together on courses. I'm trying to even remember how many years back. It's been quite a while that we've been working together, and
it was 2013, I think, was the first time that I taught.
7 years.
I'm trying to remember if it was this course or an earlier version of this course.
No, so I know we've gone through. I've updated the outlines on the course site for you at least once. So there's been at least a couple, and I apologize, because it's been so many years of doing training courses here now. They tend to blur a little while too. So it's been as always. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you. You are one of the most consummate professionals and easiest guys to work with, and folks always love your course. Tell me how you got into this and what your background is. So for the folks on the website,
sure.
Tell us where you came from and how you wound up being such a expert educator, but in these areas. Tell me a story.
Fair enough.
Uncle John.
So I've been working in security for 20 years. It's what I've done for my entire career. And actually, how I got into it was by complete accident. I started writing computer programs at like 6 years old. I got my start in security by, pirating software at like 12 years old. I forget how old I was. So by the time I go to college, I'm like, I'm done with this computer stuff. I've been doing it for 12 years. I get a degree in theoretical astrophysics. And it was paid for by the United States Air Force. So I was going into the military, ended up hurting my knees and shoulder, basically being a young man and doing stupid things and getting hurt, and needed a job because it was right at the end of my college career as I was graduating, and kind of fell right into doing IT and cybersecurity work in the late 90s for Ernst & Young. But I think the trainer a couple of slots ago was talking about, how a lot of people in cybersecurity use military terminology. Well, prior to PayPal and eBay and electronic commerce, the only people who really cared were military, and it brought those biases in. And a lot of people, my age and older, at least typically have some affiliation to military organization. So how I got into teaching cyber threat intelligence is, that's applying intelligence disciplines to cybersecurity. And while there are lots of incompatibilities of a military mindset of cybersecurity, certainly I think the way that an intelligence analyst would look at things is very, I would argue, very applicable to how we do cybersecurity, because ultimately, we talk about doing technical things, and there are technical aspects of my course, but cybersecurity is not about technology. Technology is a tool, like a hammer, saw, whatever. What matters is the intent and purpose of the person wielding that tool, what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish, and how you defend against that. You have to have some knowledge of what they intend to do and how they go about doing that. So it's kind of an interesting way of bringing the human back into cybersecurity and how we defend things, because, like I said, there's a human being at the other end of the keyboard who's making decisions, has intentions, and has desires, and a lot of those things manifest themselves in unique ways. There's a colleague of mine who makes malware detection rules, and as human beings, we like labeling things and saying, okay, this is Emotet, or this is TrickBot, or this is whatever. He creates very general rules, right? Doesn't attribute anything, but like one was an RTF file, a rich text format file, where the first 1,000 characters or so aren't actually letters, because you're trying to embed scripting content and obfuscation in there. It's something that would never be. And we see by looking at all this stuff, hey, I can make an interesting detection tool, because the way criminals try to obfuscate their content in a text file or an RTF file or a maldoc or anything really creates other detection opportunities and other prevention opportunities. So I spent a lot of my time developing this course, and every time I teach it, there's new elements to it. Is how to apply kind of the intelligence framework to cybersecurity problems, to understand the attackers and how to disrupt their attacks, to protect organizations, and really how to deal with kind of some of the interesting deception that goes on. There's a model in a module in the course where I talk about malware that looks like it came from a terrorist organization, had all the tidbits in there, but being able to look deeper and say, okay, here are some oddities I see in how they type text that says, no, it's really a copy and paste. It's not really an attempt to be a terrorist organization doing terroristy things. So there's a lot of just anecdotes like that go into the course. I try to include a lot of exercises, but on the front end, it's also how to think about things, because how human beings observe information, especially when you become an experienced professional, where you have the benefit of a large body of history behind you of things, of your own war stories, right? That also becomes a problem, because then you interpret current events via the frame of things you've seen in the past, even though that might necessarily not be true, or how things are can appear biased. So there's lots of reporting all the time, on cybersecurity stuff and security companies doing this, that, and the other thing to find threats and jumping to conclusions and really, not doing anybody any good. The most likely, outcome of that is just wasting time. But there's been a lot of very high profile stories in cybersecurity that were just wrong. I want to say it was Supermicro. I'm trying to forget. This is like 2 years ago, where they had the little
chip. I believe. Yeah.
From Bloomberg, right?
Exactly. And now everybody had the question is, why would you even bother to do that when you could just do it in software? Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
I mean, the immense amount of time that wasted on everybody trying to find this, right? Because there's a back door in there. It's okay. Well, if there's a back door, it's got to communicate over TCP/IP, so everybody's looking at NetFlow for it, right? In government, in military, everybody, and it was just. I don't know how they got it wrong. It was such.
And then they doubled down on it too, right? Everybody
said no. They still hold to it.
They still. And we still have yet to see anything of it.
It's
But
so
go on.
There's a lot of information that we professionals need to vet, right? And like so the Bloomberg story was one, right? I was working for a security vendor. This lands on my lap, and I'm like, this is BS. And you tossed it back. It's like, we're gonna need more analysis than that. It's like, all right, well, I guess there goes my next 48 hours. So there's lots of the industry's full of ways of detecting things, and I'm getting my PhD in informatics, but really it's cybersecurity machine learning, right? And we hear a lot about machine learning and AI, and I don't talk a lot about it in this course, but I do make fleeting references, because what we don't really do in cybersecurity machine learning, the same thing we don't really do with threat intelligence, or I should say don't do enough of, is really understanding what the data means in the context it exists in, and how much really can you interpret and infer from that. What really can you infer from just a domain name? And though people say, this is, these couple of data points and these couple of pivots proves that it's APT 28, which is, I forget whether it's the FSB or GRU, the Russian intelligence.
Some bear,
maybe it was one of the bears, fancy bear,
lots of bears,
sexy bear, or whatever.
You realize it's the rule of the internet. Someone's going to use that from now on, and there's going to be some APT that they're going to use that joke now that you've made it. So.
Well, that's fine. There's a couple of my colleagues who do create fictional APT groups with names, right? just for fun to see if they ever catch on, right? One's like Hot Cousin. I forget exactly what they are.
I think there's a time-honored thing. Is what's the funniest thing we can sneak into the official nomenclature in one way or another? I think that's a time-honored challenge of how many puns or double entendres or something like that you can do that, because everybody you're trying to inject a little fun into this otherwise somewhat serious topic area. But so you go back. I mean, so you kind of told me about you've come from the intelligence aspect, applying humans to this field, and I think that is exactly at the root of all these problems in computers is eventually humans. So that analysis is obviously interesting to a lot of folks because you can see a lot of insights into it. And speaking of those humans, tell me a little bit about the kinds of folks that normally attend your courses. You've given them enough times now. You probably have a pretty good feel for who's this course right for.
Sure. Certainly there's been military intelligence professionals who've taken it who are they're starting from the intelligence side. Okay, figure out how to do their job on the cybersecurity realm. Certainly the people in enterprises, who are trying to kind of up their level to really kind of produce the communication that their executives want or their boards want, right? The last trainer was talking about how important it is for communication. Following, the bosses, the CEOs, the board doesn't really want to see, a report out of IDA on malware. They want to know, it's like, okay, is this an organized group and what are they trying to steal? And to do that, you've kind of get, figure out what you can learn from the data, what you can't learn from the data. And I mean, I don't teach this in the context of my course, but the most important thing is, your ability to communicate that in a way that makes sense to whoever is consuming it. If you're an intelligence agency, there's a policymaker behind it, right? If you're an enterprise, there's a CISO or board, whoever behind it. If you're a security company, there's, the business buyers of whatever products you have. If you're trying to explain it to the media, there was a stint for 2 or 3 years or so where a lot of I were involved in, I was very frequently in contact with the media. And right, how do you explain it? And not just explain it, actually, this is a few times I was also vetting other people's reporting, because the stories were that kind of importance, where they take their, one set of professionals and they give the data to another set to say, all right, show me if this is real or not. So communication.
That's just good engineering practice. You should always get somebody to check your numbers. And second opinion for medical. There's lots of. I think it's a good practice. Didn't mean to cut you off.
It never occurred to me that would happen, right? But it's for as much as people want to critique the press and things they get wrong, and I did just 5 minutes ago, right? There are a lot of journalists who take this very seriously on certainly the important stories and say, all right, I want someone else to vet this stuff to tell me that this is legit, and that does happen. So I mean, in 2016, I was involved in all the election-related hacking investigations, right? And talk about outsized importance, because we're still talking about that in the United States 4 years later. There's a lot of talk about it in Europe
now.
And right now, and so it's. There's a lot of very interesting, like I said, high-level cases that you can get involved in really quickly. This really becomes important, and obviously not every incident in a SOC you would apply these kind of details, but at a certain point, being able to spot trends in what your attackers are doing and how they're trying to get in. I do a lot of pro bono case for like private individuals, so I get. Probably the biggest thing that people bring to me, like off the street, is business email compromise, right? Of people trying to steal housing payments for mortgages, which is usually the biggest dollar transaction any normal person involved in. And, knowing how they operate, and be like, okay, they tell me all this stuff. It's like, there's only really one data point I want to know, is go look in the forwarding rules of Gmail or Yahoo or whatever you're using, and see where they're forwarding the emails. It's like, well, there's nothing in there. It's like, yeah, there is, because that's how they're viewing your email. And they take a look. Oh, it's forwarding off to this Gmail address. Okay, well, I know to talk to Google to start dealing with this problem. And both, like I said, the experience of, okay, this is how this actor operates, so I know what they're putting in place, but also know the other organizations involved, and having those networks to be able to talk to an organization like Google, right? A company that isn't very easy to talk to or accessible, to say, hey, there's an email over here that's being used for business email compromise, and use that to sit there and enumerate hundreds or thousands of other ones and start disrupting entire networks that ultimately save people lots of money, right? Or saving them from being theft of lots of money.
It's a real problem these days. We're seeing such a ransomware boom. I mean, the UHS compromise, so much stuff. And I think you're absolutely right. That's kind of an important lore. It's the tech companies are notoriously bad for being unreachable and for hiding behind web forms. So knowing how to do that. So give me a little feel of the kinds. I mean, the question where I'm going to is I'm trying to establish what's the kind of the skill set of folks that going into your course. I'm going to ask you, give me a little feel for the kinds of exercises you have. Do you have a little? You have some kind of little sample or anything that you wanted to go through today? Before I go to that, I'm going to ask you, what's sort of the minimum you must be this tall to ride this ride to join
Sure.
your course? What are some basic skills that you think you need to be able to get value out of it?
I think understanding basic networking, right, is an IP address and port, a little bit about how DNS works. Just because DNS is just, you'll learn a lot about an organization just on what DNS records there are. And there's a lot that can be inferred and observed in DNS, right? And there's a couple of things I'm working on that by next month I might be able to integrate into the course and demonstrate. You don't have to be an expert in DNS, don't have to be an expert in networking, but kind of understand, okay, this is how it works. And, I can find this stuff at layer 7 versus layer 4, layer 3. A little bit about malware. You don't have to be a reverse engineer, but you know a little bit about it. You mentioned one family of it, ransomware. I'm integrating a little bit of cryptocurrency stuff, but mostly it's it's the public ledger and the resources to query it. It would be helpful if you had a VM. Almost all the exercises I do are on AWS images. I give access to the course. There is some Python, but I provide most of that. So there isn't any real coding that would help you obviously do some more automated processing for intelligence. But by and large, I kind of show my work, so to speak, and the tools are there to kind of repeat the process that I teach. So I try not to be too high, right? In terms of you must have 10 years experience in a CISSP, but some basic understanding of networking, of cybersecurity, and the kind of threats that are going on, and everything else. I try to build up from there.
Cool. That's great. That sets the expectation really well. So, we've talked about the kind of students and where they should be at. When you get folks giving you feedback afterwards, what do you think are some of the big takeaways that folks will get powered up on after they leave your course?
Well, I think the last time I taught this course, it was actually one-off, but it was for Amazon and Google, right? And both who have just immense data sets, more than I have to work with. And the hope is, every organization is different, right? Every organization has different business goals, right? You take the difference between Amazon and Google and what they sell and the resources they have and what they need to protect. They went back and say, hey, what, this gave me ideas that if I looked at this data like this, or I started collecting this data and doing analytics, or went deeper and combined this with this, I could start getting more visibility into what adversaries are doing. I might get better detection, because there is no one size fits all in security, besides of, hey, go run antivirus or get an EDR tool or get a firewall with integrated threat intel or whatever, what really organizations need that have the resources to work with it is people who can think about things and understand, okay, this is the data set that I operate on, right, of Google, right? You have the entire Gmail infrastructure. To go back to my business email compromise, right? If I'm looking for interesting forwarding rules, like multiple Gmail accounts that are forwarding to the same place, but only on specific keywords, now you could start finding all of the crime in Google, for instance. Amazon, you've got AWS, right? And S3 buckets is a great example of this, right? There was 2-3 years ago, the researcher, his name forgets me, but basically, all he did was keep enumerating S3 buckets that were open to the world and says, here, look at all this data. Here,
so much juicy stuff. Yeah.
Here, right? Yeah. To where Amazon started making it more difficult to set up S3 buckets that were just open to the world. So Amazon started making changes, and I don't know if I would take that approach unless extremely frustrated, but was able to affect change by finding flaws in mass of all this new technology that we're putting out there, right? There's the rush to the cloud, right? Because the cloud's secure. Well, No one is breaking into an Amazon data center. Yes, that is true. But if you set up an EC2 image or an S3 image and you don't secure it, that's on you. That's not on Amazon. Amazon's not going to do your job for you. So now, there's this interesting gap between how we would have protected it if it's in our own infrastructure and have all the people in monitoring, and now, oh well, how you monitor stuff in AWS and get information on attacks. Well, that looks very different, and you don't have all the same tools.
There's a kind of a crack you can fall into there. You don't have all the local stuff, but it's disconnected. That's an certainly interesting dilemma you point out.
Yeah, I mean, just audit trails of who's creating and deleting images, right? Shadow IT. You made reference to UHS, but I mean, almost every breach in the last 2 years has been shadow IT because an organization's cloud account is so permissive that almost anybody can spin up an image, and that assumes that they just don't spin it up and just put it on the corporate card for reimbursement. By the way, the corporate data is still there and needs to be protected. And
this all hits
right?
really close to home for me as we make the transition, like everybody right now, into virtualized infrastructure for conferences and distribution. It's been a learning curve for me all the time. I'm putting more stuff into Azure and AWS than I ever have before to do multicast or streaming, all kinds of stuff. And that basic job of securing, I like to think I'm fairly competent on the local side of things, but I'm a newbie when it comes to the cloud stuff too, and I'm learning there all the time myself. There's all kinds of things that you point out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're all newbies, right?
Yeah, it's a brave
couple years ago. Who heard of Kubernetes?
Exactly, and you are the perfect straight man because you know where we're going next on this call. Because I see Jay showed up. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the great thing about this industry is it's always changing. We create more problems in technology than we solve, right? And you mentioned Zoom, right? As everybody went to Zoom in February and March and April,
and we had the
right?
open
and there
Zoom
were a bunch
problem.
of attacks on Zoom.
Yeah, the Zoom bombing because everybody was shipping around or not putting password on their meetings, and they had the same response and making passwords mandatory and forcing you to jump through a few hoops, like the authentication hoops folks had to jump through for this particular Zoom call, etc.
Yeah.
So I think you've given us a really good flavor of what's going on in your course and where you're going through it. Let's see if there's any folks that have any questions here.
Sure.
We've got a few folks that dropped off, and with that, so do you any final words for folks and things that I should material for me to edit put on the website, messages for your prospective students?
I think like I said, the idea is to kind of create an analyst mindset of how to look at it and find kind of the most important data points to help tell you, okay, what are the most likely attackers going to do, how they're going to do it, so that you can start, right sizing your defenses, right? Is that no organization really has unlimited funds, right? So you need to sit there and use things wisely. And we've got tools that everybody has, right? Every organization is going to have some endpoint tool. They're going to have firewalls. They're going to have Splunk, right? Where are the gaps? Right? Because everyone talks about gap analysis, but figure out, okay, how are attackers exploiting that? And what can I put in place to really improve the security posture? And often there's a lot of very straightforward and simple ways that people can improve the security of the organization, or at least improve detection. Because, as anybody who's been in security knows, is for all of these breaches, the attacker is in a network for like on the enterprise level, for the significant ones we're talking about, they're in place for months, stealing all the data, doing whatever until they finally get caught. What we need to get better is turning that months into hours and minutes. And like I said, there's a human being at the other end of the keyboard, and human beings are creatures of habits, even criminals. We learn those habits. We can find ways to detect them quicker, boot them out of networks, and prevent things like massive ransomware outbreaks. right? You know, I have a couple of colleagues who found some interesting DNS tricks to proactively notify people, hey, you're about to be hit with some major ransomware. You should take some concrete steps, and has saved organizations from being hit like UHS has.
That's awesome, John. You know, I one of the reasons I'm honored to work with all of you folks who are like experienced instructors, because you make my job easy. You digest the material into something that's easy to communicate. So communicating that to folks is awesome, easy. I know already just from the stuff editing this for the website, it's going to be super easy to package into something that's easily understandable, because you do a great job of that, sir.
Thank you.
All right. I think no last calls for questions here. That was a great wrap up there. You've obviously done a lot of TV and work. You would be on my hey, Pierre, call this guy if you want a TV interview list, because you've got just such a nice polished manner. We'll promote Jay up here, and who's been given a perfect straight introduction into the growing importance of the cloud. So
yep.
You know, actually, I'll got Jay coming here. Yeah, he should be coming on. So you two guys have the distinction of being the courses that we're the most interested in, express the most interest from our students, and that's immediately evident because everybody is making this transition to the cloud, and it's the continuing hotness, and it's not going to go away. So with that, where's Jay? Is he around? Is he hearing us? Okay, perfect. On cue. Bye, John. Have a great rest of your evening there, and scruffle kids and give the teenagers a boot, and I'll talk to you a little bit later. Thanks, John.
All right, will do. Thank you.
Hi, Jay. Let's see.
Okay, I just missed the last second or two of audio.
Oh, that's okay.
Hey, Dragos.
Hey, how's it going? The little one asleep? Everything's happy over in.
Uh-oh.
Nope.
I can't hear anything.
You can't hear me. I know audio is going out, so let's quick troubleshooting. Yeah, you can't hear me.
Let's give that a try. I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Everything is great. 5 by 5. Awesome.
Okay. Well,
my question for you was, how's everything going on the home front? Little one's asleep. Peaceful. Life is peaceful there.
Oh yeah, little one just went to sleep. I really appreciate the getting this time slot.
You guys have been awesome juggling everything. Everything's worked out very smoothly here. I'm very happy with the material we've got. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear this tutorial that you've been practicing, because John was the perfect straight man. He's been playing up. I don't know how much you caught of his last interview, but he's been playing up the importance of the growing importance in all of our operations of cloud stuff. So you are the man of the hour. So you know, I know this story because you have the distinction of being. I think you were at our very first dojo that we ever threw. You gave one of our courses. You are you've been with us for this entire bumpy ride up and down, and you've trained at so many other places. You are the consummate veteran. But tell these folks, please, sir, tell us a story about how Jay got into what he's doing right now and the genesis of this training material.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, hi, I'm Jay Beal, and I've been a very long time ago, when I was a much younger man and had hair. I'm not going to say it was, Fabio Lion's mane, but it wasn't my current look. I created a tool called Bastille Linux, and Bastille Linux was a Linux lockdown tool that taught you how to that kind of taught you a little bit about lockdown, kind of taught you about Linux security, because at the time the defaults were just awfully weak, and we were trying to we're like, wow, we want to tell people, hey, can you turn off Telnet? SSH is better. And we realized if we said, can we just turn off Telnet? People would say, oh, nah, I use that all the time to administer my systems. How else am I going to, log in as root and do things, across the internet from this, I don't want to say Wi-Fi coffee shop because this was pre-Wi-Fi. And so we realized that if we wanted people to make better decisions to let us turn off Telnet or take other hardening measures, we'd have to tell them a little bit about why and let them make an informed decision. And so, we had this tool that was helping people lock down Linux systems and also learn about Linux security. And somehow out of giving talks about that and such, I started teaching defending Linux classes, and it's one of the first. I think I was one of the first training classes at Black Hat, and one of the first training classes at CanSecWest, and I used to teach at Linux World Expo and do quite a bit of private training and teach at a number of conferences, whether we do 1 day or 5 day versions. That class, the crazy thing is that class has evolved massively since, literally I probably started teaching it in 2001, I think. And so obviously it's, well, that's my topic. There's no way a class could, class could still be relevant this far forward, unless you just, kind of over time swapped pieces and added more in and added more in. And that's really what's happened. And that's gotten me into, two things in my experience have had a huge impact on what I teach nowadays. The first is that I'm the CTO over at InGuardians, and the bulk of what we do is attack. We're either doing, and most of what we're doing is either penetration testing or red teaming, or it's doing security architecture review, where we're trying to say, here's what I would do to stop me as an attacker from getting in, or we're doing, incident response. Okay, I know what I'd do when I got in. I'd want to set up command and control infrastructure and move laterally and escalate privilege and so on. Let me go look for those things. And so much of my professional life has been attack, and so much of my kind of open source or research life has been defense. And so my class became increasingly about teaching both, about teaching you how to attack something, and thus understand what you were trying to do in the defense, and then teaching you how to defend it, and doing that by teaching you like proactive defenses. So everything that I do in my classes has moved into a very hands-on attack and defense. Okay, we're basically going to do what real attackers would do. We're going to hack our way into this thing, chaining exploits together until we've gotten our way to root or administrative privilege, and then we're going to, just like an attacker, turn around and defend the box. And of course, as an attacker, you have to defend the thing you just hacked, because the idea that it could be hacked isn't theoretical to you. You just did it. It may be theoretical to the defenders. So anyway, I've had a lot of fun teaching this over the years. As the world has progressed and become more modern and moved into the DevOps world and cloud security and container security, that's become an increasingly large part of what I'm teaching. The cool thing is that at the end of the day, a ton of what you do in trying to even secure containers, more containerized environments, is like you both handle what's new, but you also use the same kind of defenses that we've had available on the advanced side for a long time. So, today, if we get time, I'll show you AppArmor. And while AppArmor is, just a great and positive and powerful thing to use in a containerized environment, Kubernetes and Docker and such, it's also just something that came out of Linux security in the first place, and it's just gotten kind of easier and more important to use as we've gotten into the newer environments.
I think so. Yeah, Bastille, as I remember, that even predated GRSec. It was one of the first real good security tools. It was you certainly had the pedigree there for I'm trying not to. I'm actually really excited with this cloud stuff because it's been such a big part of my life over the last few months as I'm making that transition, and I'm trying not to jump to my previous questions, which is some of the other stuff that we've got to ask them. So tell me a little bit about you know, we've gone through this before once, so tell me a little bit about the typical kind of student that comes to your course, and what's the profile of the person who should look at taking your course?
Sure. And at the end of the day, the students who come to my class are both attackers and defenders. We get a ton of defenders. I think we get a ton of defenders, especially, but given how much we're doing in Kubernetes attack, we get some, we get a good set of attackers too, who want to understand the technology and understand how you attack it. I think that, the students will range in what their job role is all over the place. So some of them will be, formal security teams. Some of them will be builders who are looking to build in a way that they don't get owned. And a lot of people are honestly coming because they want to understand. They want to understand this new cloud native world. They want to understand containerized environments. They also want to understand, what's going on when we talk about cloud. We're not just talking about, okay, I'm going to lift and shift some application, from the virtual machines in my data center to the virtual machines in Amazon or Microsoft or Google's data centers. And so it's really fun. We get really into how does this work, and then we get really into attack and defense. And so we get a pretty wide set of students.
I think that you've got normally I would ask for like takeaways, what folks are going to get from your course, but I think you've got you gave me a sneak preview this afternoon of some of the material, and I think that's just a really great flavor of what you have in your course. So I'll bow out for a little bit and let you work your magic and teach some folks some things. And I think you've got a great little fun tutorial for folks. So
Cool.
I'll stop interrupting and let you do your thing.
I'm happy to. Okay, well, cool. Let's do this. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you all a few slides, and then I'm going to show you a demo video. I record all my demos because, like everybody, tons of fat fingering, and even if I type everything perfectly, if I don't record my demos, the demo gods strike, and they strike often and they strike hard. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's see how we can do this. So I'm going to just flip back and forth between which application I'm sharing, but not a ton of flipping. And let me just move that window out of the way. And okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Kubernetes attack and defense, and I'm going to show you one of the kinds of capture the flag exercises that we do in the class. This is my bio slide. Everyone has, very, very wordy bios that it's kind of sea of text. So I've just kind of given you a set of things that I've contributed to or passionate about. So let's get right on with it. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to give you a little tiny bit of prerequisite knowledge about Kubernetes, and then I'm going to show you an attack. And given kind of the smaller amount of time we have, I'm not going to get really, really far into explaining what Kubernetes is, but I'm going to do a little tiny bit. So just real quick, most people have heard of Docker, maybe used Docker or another container runtime, but they've never touched Kubernetes. It's on that list of things that they want to look into eventually. So I'm going to kind of tell you where Kubernetes comes from, and then we're going to attack it. So Kubernetes basically comes out of what Google does with their data centers. So Google's got 2.5 million servers, at least. That was the number that they told us publicly in 2016. And we also know that every program that gets launched at Google, we call that a workload. Every workload that gets launched at Google is launched as a container. And we know that they basically said back in 2014, surely more by now, that they launched 3,300 workloads, 3,300 containers per second. They actually said 2 billion containers a week, but 3,300 times a second, something at Google has to figure out, okay, I've got this program. It's got certain RAM requirements, it's got certain, maybe disk I/O requirements, it's got certain CPU requirements, and I have to figure out which of 2.5 million servers I'm going to deploy that program to. On top of that, you've got a special challenge. When you have 2.5 million servers, drive failures become an issue. Hard drives have a failure rate, and the annualized failure rate for hard drives, at that 2016 point was 1.95%, 2%. So if you have, if you think of a server as either failed or needing to be pulled soon, if it is a hard drive failure, well, Google with 2.5 million servers has a hard drive failure every 9 minutes. So so you're trying to launch all these programs. Just to figure out where you're going to put them is going to take automation, and the machines they're running on may fail, and you're going for multiple nines worth of reliability, because that's how we work in 2020. So you're going to need a bunch of redundancy, and you're going to need to automate that. So I'm going to talk a little bit just about one other reason that we get into Kubernetes, and that is, so I've just talked about the Borg, and the Borg was basically is what Google uses for its data centers, and it created Kubernetes very much in the image of the Borg. Now, where else is Kubernetes coming from? So Kubernetes is also coming from, the need for Kubernetes is coming out of microservices. And this kind of microservice, you'd almost call it a microservice revolution, is this idea that instead of writing one monolithic program and having it, I'm going to give you an example of a simple e-commerce app. Instead of creating one monolithic program and just having people interact with that and having all of your developers work on that, you break your program up. And part of the reason you do it is Fred Brooks' Mythical Man Month, his first book covered this, but we know that 40 developers can't create code 4 times as fast as 10 developers because the overhead, the communication coordination goes up so massively. And so one way of handling that is to break a program up into multiple pieces. And so there are other reasons for doing this that I get into in class. The big one that I'll allude to really briefly is Jeff Bezos at Amazon basically created AWS with one memo in a way. And that one memo said, hey, if we have any service that we're creating internally for other programs at Amazon to use, we have to make them available via a REST API that's well documented. And you have to expect at any point that the company may take that service that you've made, say it's Postgres. You've got a service that stands up Postgres databases for people. You have to put that on a REST API, you have to version it, you have to document it, and you have to expect at any point we might just take a cost center standing up Postgres databases and turn it into a profit center, making that available to the entire world to use and get charged for by the minute. So that's kind of the other reason that what we see is you take a program like a e-commerce app, and instead of having just one program running on one server or on 3 servers, you say, I'm going to take the storefront web app part and I'll put that on one machine, as it were. Make that one workload, one service. I'll have an account service for logging in and for setting things about your account. I'll have another service that's for checking our inventory and reducing that inventory when we buy things. And I'll have a shipping service for fulfilling orders. And I've just advanced my slide, sorry about that. And the advantage of that is that if all of these pieces basically have a versioned REST API that all 4 of these groups, 10 developers, 10 developers, 10 developers, 10 developers, they can all work independently of each other. It also means if it turns out the inventory service needs a lot more copies of itself running, then we can scale just the inventory service separately. And there are tons of other advantages. But when you move to this model, where you're going to say, okay, well, I've got some number of machines, and it's going to be dynamically created and dynamically destroyed that are running the storefront web app, and some number of machines running that shipping service, and some number running the inventory, some number running the account. they've all got to be able to find each other, which means I'm kind of like, everything gets really dynamic. And when I get out of that, what I end up needing, whether I'm trying to scale to 2.5 million servers like Google, or whether I'm trying to have teams be able to just deploy easily and maintain easily and scale easily, I end up creating a software-defined data center. And that software-defined data center is done by orchestrating container environments. And so you end up getting kind of these features and functions. And this is, and I would get into more of this, but what I want to do now is stop lecturing and get into a demo. So this demo is focused not on showing you what Kubernetes is, but actually just showing you an attack. And so what I've done is I've created a demo that's focused on that uses the movie Inception. You don't have to remember the movie Inception. It's okay. I will step you through just a tiny bit here. Guy in the back, Leonardo DiCaprio. He's, I don't want to call him the bad guy, but he is basically trying to trick the guy in front, Robert Fisher, into believing a new thought. And the way he's going to do that is take him into a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And so this demo basically follows that kind of theme. So I'll talk you through what little of the movie's plot might be necessary to understand. I think it's kind of basically not much, if any. I'm going to take our video and make that full screen. I realize I'm not sharing still sharing the PowerPoint. So I'm going to click back out and share my, maybe I was sharing the right thing. And I'm going to share my, just make sure I'm getting the right one. And I'm going to share my presentation. Cool. Wait, I just went back to sharing PowerPoint. Sorry about that. Hopefully for those of you who aren't watching live, Dragos can edit this. And if he doesn't, then at least you can get a laugh out of me asking him to. So here we go. So this is, so what I'm going to do is just take you through. We're starting from, like many Kubernetes attacks, we're starting from the perspective of assumed breach. Assume that some workload in the cluster has been compromised, or assume that a developer has been phished, or a developer is even maybe gone bad, and the attacker is inside one container on a Kubernetes node in a Kubernetes cluster, and is trying to see if they can transform that into taking over the cluster. So here we go. We called this thing that got taken over supply chain because the mechanism of assumed breach that we used was a typo squatted Python library. So we've got this shell inside of the supply chain container, and I'm going to do a little bit of copy paste. You're going to see that, and I'm going to run a quick command. I'm going to run kube control. That's our Kubernetes binary. It's not in the container. You can upload it there or pull it in. I'm going to tell kube control if there's not since there won't be a configuration file in here, because no one's expecting me to just be, me as an attacker to be in here running commands. This supply chain pod is just supposed to run one program, and it's got me in there. So I'm going to point server to the Kubernetes server, and that's just Kubernetes creates a DNS service for this. I'm going to say that I'm going to authenticate to the Kubernetes cluster using whatever service account token has been automatically put into this container, which is the default. And I'll tell it where to find a certificate authority. And then I'm going to run get pods. And what I'll get is a list in my current namespace, the default namespace, of what pods are here. And I see I've got 3. I've got something called position checker, something called Robert Fisher, and something called supply chain. Supply chain is the one I'm already in. So I'm going to take that. If I look at supply chain one, that's the one I'm in. You'll see that host name is a total match, not just the supply chain part, but that kind of random hash. And now I'm going to create a quick alias. And this alias says every time I type kube control, I want those 3 long arguments to always be there. So I've set an alias. Now whenever I type kube control, it can be nice and short and easier to read. So I'm going to type get services. And this is going to give me a list of the internal load balancers that are available to me in this Kubernetes namespace. And I'll see I've got one called check position. and I've got one called Kubernetes, which we already know about. That's the master, that's the API, that's the API server. And I've got Robert Fisher. Okay, that Robert Fisher, remember, is the person Leonardo DiCaprio is trying to con. And I can type get secrets, and the secrets, the service count tokens will be listed as secrets. Also, there'll be some other things like passwords, what have you. So we see one that's called flag. Okay, so we got a flag, and it says, now go get Robert Fisher to trust you. So I built this scenario for you as something that's where you walk through, and this is what we do in the class. You walk through collecting flags. So this flag says, okay, the next stage is you have to get Robert Fisher to trust you. So Robert Fisher was the name of a pod, but it was also the name of a service. So I'm going to curl that service, that load balancer. So I ask, curl Robert Fisher. What I get is, hey, I'm a microservice, and I answer the endpoint trust me, where you pass in last name equal to some name. So we're going to try the name Cobb, because Cobb is Leonardo DiCaprio's character's name in the movie. So we want Robert Fisher to trust Cobb. So I've left some of my fat fingering in. So I'm going to type curl Robert Fisher, and then that trust me endpoint, pass in Cobb as the last name. And Robert Fisher says, hey, you're not my head of security, are you? I've checked this out with my check position service, and it's never heard of you. Okay, so what this means is to get Robert Fisher to trust us, to get which is what the flag has told us to do. We're going to need to get Robert Fisher to think that Cobb is his head of security. So we check out that check position service, and I do a curl against that, and it says, hey, this microservice answers position, where person is a last name. So cool. Let's see what happens when we put in position is Cobb, and I've got my quick little fat finger here, and person equals Cobb. And it says, hey, he doesn't work for you. Like, okay, well, we're gonna have to do something about that. And the cool thing is there's a nice little thing. If we're able, there's a little, it's not really a vulnerability, works as intended. If you can put your own, if we could stage our own pod, our own container into a namespace that where a service, where there's some service, then we can, as you'll see, we can actually intercept traffic. We can get some of the traffic that goes to that service. We can basically sign up for any internal load balancer we want to. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So we're going to look at that service check position. I do that kube control get service, and this time I give it the name of a service, and I say I want YAML as my output. I can say YAML or I can say JSON. YAML is the more human readable. So what this service is, we're not going to look at all of this stuff, but what this service is Kubernetes, if you create a service, will create an IP address that works inside the cluster and a port and a name. And anything that goes to that IP address and port will then be redirected to some other port on any of the containers that have the same labels that are named in the service. So we see that this service check position, what it does is anytime you send traffic to that IP address on that port, it forwards it to any pods in the cluster that have the label app Kubernetes IO component set to position checker. Well, if we can stage our own pod, we can just set our own label to the same thing as that. So I've created a little man-in-the-middle program and a pod description. And we're basically going to upload that pod description, and we're going to in that pod description, we're going to have the same labels that we saw there, the app Kubernetes IO component position checker. And I'll show you the program that's actually running in that container, the man-in-the-middle service. It's a Node.js program I've written. Whoops, I have hit the wrong button and jumped to my next video. So let me just put us back where we were. We were right around. Okay, we were here. We were uploading the we're uploading the man-in-the-middle deployment, the pod definition we want to use. We're uploading a JavaScript, a Node.js program, and we're going to check and make sure that that's landed here. And now we're going to take a look at this. And what this thing is going to do, this is very similar to the real one, to the real position checker. But what this thing's going to do is whenever you pass in position and a name, it's going to answer security head. So this thing basically says whatever you ask it, it's security head. We could make it more specific and say, hey, the person puts in Cobb, make it security head, but we're not doing that. And our definition for this deployment has the same labels as we're in the service, as we're in the service, as the load balancer demands. So here's the trick. I've been able to deploy this. If I wasn't able to deploy this pod, this trick wouldn't work. But because I'm allowed to deploy pods into the same namespace as this service, I can go and get some of the traffic. So I'm going to stand up my man-in-the-middle pod. And what happens now is whenever this thing gets queried, whenever check position gets queried, one out of every 2 times, the traffic's going to come to my man-in-the-middle pod. So, or I actually want to start calling man-in-the-middle monkey in the middle again. That was kind of Doug's song, also of CanSecWest fame. Doug's song's term, and it's more appropriate in 2020. So we've got, if we do this curl against this service a whole lot of times, half the time we'll get he doesn't work for you, and half the time we'll get he's your security head, based on whether the load balancer is choosing us at random, or choosing our man-in-the-middle pod at random, or the real actual one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to curl Robert Fisher and ask Robert Fisher to trust us. So I'm like, hey, Robert Fisher, do you trust me? And Robert Fisher had checks with the check position service, and this time he got the right pod. So unfortunately, and time again, he keeps getting the right one, keeps getting the never heard of you. That's not helpful. And then once we've gotten to, how many did that take? Something like 7 tries. So I'm going to guess the next 6 maybe would hopefully go to us. This is law of large numbers isn't helping for us here. But we get to this point where Robert Fisher queries our man-in-the-middle pod instead of the real one, at which point he says, I trust you. And we get to that next part of the movie where they're going to go deeper into the dream, and they're going to invade his uncle's dream, and we're going to try to get root on one of the nodes in the cluster, and it gives us a service count token. So this is actually a good spot. I'm going to check. I'm going to just check and see if Dragos gives me the hook on the neck. If he wants to cut me off here, this is a great place. Alternatively, I can keep going and show you more. You
go.
Okay, coolio. Let's do it. So here we are. So first, let's just point out, like, one of the big problems here is basically that we were allowed to deploy pods into the same namespace, and our program probably didn't even need a service account. It probably didn't even need the ability to talk to Kubernetes and ask it to do things at all. And if it did, it probably shouldn't have anywhere near this much privilege. Because once it can deploy pods into the same namespace, if we don't use namespace isolation, then we get this kind of man-in-the-middle issue. And for any of you who are like, wait, but there were 7 wrong tries before, 7 times where it hit the right thing before it hit yours. The way we could hack that, I mean, containers are really, really inexpensive. It doesn't take a whole lot of RAM to run more copies of this program. We could have made our deployment, instead of deploying 1 man-in-the-middle pod, it could have deployed, say, 99. If it deployed 99, then roughly 99 times out of 100, the the load balancer would have sent the traffic to us. So, okay, I'm going to go forward and we'll go the next level. So what I do with these capture the flags is, you get 1 flag, you go for the next one. You get 1 piece of access, you go for the next thing, and we just keep getting deeper. We just keep going for more and more access. So doing an inception style thing, this is the point in the video where you know you've gotten somewhere because we pop up another picture. So now we've gotten Robert Fisher, a guy on the right, to trust Leonardo DiCaprio. They're now going to try to they're going to go into another level of dreaming, and we're going to go into a little bit more attack. So I'm now taking that. I've taken that service account token and I've written it out into token.txt. Since I was in user bin directory, it's in user bin token.txt, which is, you know, unusual, but it'll do. So I'm going to set my kube control alias to now use that service account token instead of the one that belonged to this pod. And now I'll try get pods. And when I get my get pods, it's just kind of what I do just to see if kube control is working, if my configuration works. So I see these 4 pods, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to upload this thing I've created called an attack pod. And an attack pod is just a pod that tries to mount the host file system, the nodes file system, outside of the container, basically the machine that Kubernetes that this pod is running on, that this container exists on. I'm going to try to get it to its file system. And so I've created this pod that'll do that. So I tried this out, and it says, sorry, you aren't allowed to do that. And the reason you're not allowed to do that isn't you're not allowed to create pods, but rather that any pods that you create have to validate against this pod security policy. And the pod security policy doesn't permit pods that mount things using host path volumes, the equivalent to the Docker -v thing. And so, sorry, that's not going to work for you. Now we're going to evade that because there's a cool thing that that a lot of people wouldn't think of at first, and that is there is another way to use a host path volume. So this is so here's our attack pod, and our attack pod lays out some containers and tries to use host path mount. We're going to try something else. We're going to create a persistent volume claim. We're going to say, hey, I'd like to have a different class of storage, but this class of storage will be backed by a directory on the host file system. So we can get around that if the pod security policy wasn't written specifically to block that too. So this is my deployment now. My deployment's going to have a persistent volume claim. And that's going to basically say, hey, I'd like a gig of storage, and here's the kind of thing that I want. And the kind of thing I want is this persistent volume I've created. Persistent volume is going to ask for host path /. And so now I've got my deployment, and my deployment is going to mount into this container. It's going to mount into the container this rootfs, this persistent volume claim. So I try to apply that, and don't worry, in the class we go slower, and there's a lot more explanation. If we try to do that, it turns out we end up being able to. So we get a funky little error, but we're able to do it, and doing that gets us. We use Metasploit in the class. Doing that gets us another session. It basically puts another container into the cluster. And that other container has a similar name to the other supply chain one, but it's a different one. And we'll see that in a second. So I'm going to interact with that session, get a shell, do my normal tricks for that, for making that pretty. And here we are, and I'm going to cat out etc hostname. So I've cd'd in /root where I mounted the nodes file system. And I'm going to cat out the host name, and I see kind worker 2. And kind is interesting. It's called Kubernetes in Docker. So it turns out the way this cluster works, similar inception, dream within a dream, is inside our Kubernetes cluster, we're running we're running a Docker container. We're running a container, like a pod with a container in it, and the container in it is another whole Kubernetes cluster. And we could nest further down than that if we wanted to. So we find ourselves on the worker node, but the cool thing is we find that there's this kube config, the kind of block that kubelet, that kube control reads, and that kube config will be both authentication and also a pointer to where the API server is to talk to. So if we take that kube config outer default thing we see there, and put it into our kube control command, not as the token, but as the whole configuration, and do a get pods, we find there's a different cluster, and this different cluster has kind cluster inception. So what we're going to do now is create a deployment, and I've just done a simple copy paste. So the first half of the screen and the second half of the screen are the same here. And I'm going to stand up another pod that's another container. Sorry, another pod that has a container in it called supply chain, and supply chain will be pulled from this image I know, this image I have already that I've been using that gets me interpreter shells. And so I'm going to take that configuration I have for the outer Kubernetes cluster, the one that's running, so we're in an inner Kubernetes cluster. This thing's going to be the outer one, and I'm going to apply that. And when I apply that, when I start that thing running in the outer cluster, it starts from interpreter, and here we are. We're in. If I grab that session 19 now, 18 and 19. If I grab that, if I grab session 18, I'm going to find myself inside an outer clusters pod. So I'm going to clear my screen, and I've done another picture from the movie. So now we're getting further and further. We're in another level of dreaming. I'm going to set my terminal to kind of a classic one I used when I was on a modem, BT100. And I'm going to run a tool that we created in Guardians called Paratis, and it's an open source Kubernetes attack tool that it's written. We write it in Go, and we're very, very happy for anyone who wants to help. So we're going to use Paratis, and Paratis has a bunch of different attacks built into it. So I'm going to run Paratis. I have to tell it where to find the API server, and then I can go. And so what Paratis does is it tries to basically keep escalating privileges and moving laterally a little bit, but it's basically about a privilege escalation, like getting more and more service counts. So it's got all these menu items, and there's numbers on the left that you can enter, or you can memorize the names and use the names on the right. And so I'm gonna just show you that we got some nice little ASCII art here, because what console-based hacker tools complete without ASCII art. And this current host name will turn out to be the pod that I'm in. I'm in the default namespace. I'm going to see a bunch of things I can do. Like I can, look at my list of service accounts that I've collected so far. I'll start out with just one, with the one that's, that's in the supply chain pod. I can add more manually, or I can go and try to get some. So I can I can try to do all these things that I might do with kube controller. In other cases are much more, there's a lot more that's automated here. So like one of the ones we're going to do is try to get a reverse root shell on a node. And that is, we're going to do it by launching a host path mounting pod and then editing its cron tab file, to add a reverse shell. So we'll show you this. It's a whole bunch of things this thing can do. One of the ones we're going to use is this, is where we've taken for Kubernetes clusters that are built with kops on Google Cloud. There's a nice little kind of weakness where if you can reach the metadata API, and if you can reach the storage API for Google Cloud, the GCS API, then by default, unless it's been hardened, all the service counts can read all the buckets in the project. And so what we end up doing, what we've automated, is this quick little process where you're in the container that's running on a node, you reach out to the metadata API and ask it for a service, for a GCP service account, and it gives you the GCP service count for the node. And then you take that GCP service count, unless things have been changed, you can then read all the objects in the buckets that are in the project, including the bucket where the installer kops puts kind of the bootstrapping service accounts for the cluster. So we're going to use that. We've automated that into Paratis, and I've told Paratis, hey, go find these, go find the bucket, read through the bucket, find service counts, and store them. And so we've got these service count tokens for some bootstrapped accounts. So we've got a bunch. We started out, we got the first thing was we hit the metadata API and got a token for GCP. and we got the project ID, and then we found the bucket that had cops credentials in it. And I'm just gonna advance this forward. So once we've done that, I'm gonna type SA menu and I'm gonna do list service accounts. And I get a list of all the service accounts. So we have the one that was, for the name that we got from the pod, but then we've also got a whole pile of others, all these GCS acquired ones. So Paredes marks where it got it from. And I'm gonna now switch which service account, which account I'm going to be, and I'm gonna make myself the admin. And now I'm gonna switch which namespace I'm in. And there's the default namespace, and then there's some other namespaces. The kube system namespace is basically always there, and that's where the Kubernetes control plane elements run. So I'm gonna switch over to that kube system namespace. And once I've done that, let's see if there's anything I can do. Let me ask for all the secrets. Oh, cool. I asked for all the secrets. I got the contents of all the secrets, and now I've stored all, and now I have all those service accounts. And these are for different components of Kubernetes. So, I see a route controller, daemon set controller token. These things all would have different kinds of privilege. So now I'm going to take my admin token that was able to get all those secrets. I'm just going to keep using my admin account, and I'm going to try that reverse root shell trick. And so the way this reverse root shell trick works, I think I'm trying to fast forward this a little bit and move this back. The way that trick works is it's gonna give me a reverse shell, and I just have to get a netcat listener going. So just to show that I've got lots of privilege, I went and grabbed one of the secrets, and there might be one other thing I do. So this we added into Kubernetes the ability to run arbitrary kube control commands, and also the ability to do some amount of kind of curling of get and post requests. So we're going to do a get request against, I'm using checkip.dyn.dns.org. I want to find out the IP address of the machine I'm on. And I get an IP address, and I'm going to try out my attack host path mounting attack. And you might say, wait, isn't there a pod security policy that blocks that? Well, that's okay, I'm admin now, so I don't have to worry about that. And something else I can do is I can run a command in every pod in the cluster, or every pod in this namespace. And this is just another way of demonstrating my level of privilege. So I'm just gonna say I wanna run the ID command in every pod. And just to demonstrate that that in almost all the pods, I can run a program. So at this point, I'm gonna go a little further and just take that curl command. Sorry, I'm gonna take wait a second here. Oh, I got ahead of myself a little bit. Okay, well, so I'm going to get a list of namespaces, switch back to that default namespace. I'm going to list the secrets that are available. I'll see some service count tokens, but I'll also see a flag. So let's get our flag. So I'm going to do a kube control get secret flag and output it as YAML. I'm doing all this from within Paredes just so I don't have to, quit out of it. And I'm going to take that long flag, and what Kubernetes does is base64 encodes all the secrets. That isn't to make them more secret, it's just encoding. It's there to, and just gonna go back here. I'm going to take that, I'm gonna take that secret, I'll base64 decode it, and that's really cool. I've got admin on the cluster. So now I'm being asked, can you get a flag on the master nodes file system? And that's where we finally get to use that thing I alluded to and haven't gotten around to, the attack pod host path mount. And so I'm going to set up a reverse shell. And what's going to happen, and what's going to make this, work is basically we stage an attack pod, and that attack pod's going to run the netcat command for us. And if we have a listener, we'll catch that shell. And then and then it's going to remove the attack pod just to keep things clean. So what's happened now is the netcat the reverse shell that's sent to us isn't sent in real time. Paredes goes and puts a cron tab entry in so that once a minute a reverse shell will try to hit us, will try to reach us. So I'm gonna set up a quick little shell. I'm gonna listen on the port that I put in, and now I'm just gonna wait up to a minute. And once it's been a minute, I get that shell. So these last 2 lines at the bottom are me getting root. And this basically puts us at the end of the movie. So I'm now, if I look at my host name, I'm on the actual outer nodes. I can see kind of the IP addresses at this thing staged at GCP. And I can see user accounts and etc password and so on. So I've got root on the end, and that should get me my last flag. My last flag says, okay, you've won. Okay, not a really exciting flag, but that's it. So I think that I was thinking I might show you one of the kinds of defenses we do in the class where that would have broken that attack. And I think what I'll do is I'll do it pretty quickly. We use AppArmor, and we spend some serious lecture time in the class talking about how AppArmor works, and then we create a custom profile. But I'm going to show you AppArmor here real quick, just to show you what it can do and kind of how easy to read it is. So this is an AppArmor profile. It confines only one program. It confines our syslogv, and these are the entries. It basically says, okay, let's skip these includes for now, but it basically says, here are the root special powers. This thing needs to run as root, but all of root special powers, they're all broken up and numbered and given names. And if you want, you can run using AppArmor or other tools that are available to you, especially in containerized environments. You can say that you want an entire container to run where even though root will be there, root won't have the ability to say maybe override the permissions in the file system, or so you can say what root special powers will exist, and any that you don't name in your allow list won't be given. And you can say basically, okay, I'm going to let I'm going to allow this in this container. Any programs that run in this container will have the ability only to read these files. They'll only be able to write this file here and files in this directory right here. This is a really, really nice and simple and very readable profile. Like finding out what to put in it, that's the hard part. We do that in the class. But the cool thing about AppArmor is, unlike ASCII Linux, which we also teach, it's really, really easy to understand, with only a few minutes of introduction. So this is that rsyslog thing. We have capabilities that are named. We have the files. We have files, which includes globbing. And I'm going to show you what happens in a cluster where we put in either a pod security policy or a gateway or a OPA gatekeeper configuration, where we say, okay, all the pods in the cluster have to run with an AppArmor profile from this set. So if I want to show you what happens if AppArmor is running. So I've got here kind of a similar scenario where I've created that attack pod, the pod that's mounting the host's file system. And so I'm going to go into /root where I've mounted the host's file system and try to cat out etc shadow. And I can't, permission's denied. And it's denied even though I'm root. And the reason it's denied is because I've created an AppArmor profile that this pod's good confined by. And the AppArmor profile says, I don't care if you're root, you can't use the root special power that lets you read files that don't belong to you. And so even though we're root, we can't read that file, and we couldn't change its permissions if we wanted to. We lose, without the right capabilities, we kind of lose that power. And this is one of the cool defenses we can do. It's been in the Docker world, it's a lot more popular than in the outside Linux world. And as a result, it's more popular in in Kubernetes and other container orchestration systems. So anyway, that's my short class. You've seen an attack. You kind of got a sense for you got a sense for how to defeat at least one part of the attack chain. So we could defeat that. Monkey in the middle attack by using some namespace isolation, by not letting by really chopping up namespaces, and by using some RBAC. We can when we had that pod security policy, made an end run around a pod security policy. Well, we can have better ones. We can use tools like OPA Gatekeeper, which we do in the class. And if somebody does end up with a pod staged in the cluster that can mount a host root file system, if all of that fails and they're able to do that, we can make it so all the pods in the cluster have to have an AppArmor profile, and that AppArmor profile can make things really rough on our attacker. So yeah, these are kind of this is similar to what the class is like. So in the class, we do a lecture section, and then we go through an exercise, and the exercise is basically similar to a lot of training models, is copy and paste with explanation, and then you can go off book if you want. But we kind of tell you, no matter what level you're at, you'll make it through the exercise. And so in each of the exercises, we go through and hack our way through something, get our flags, get to administrative privilege, and then go turn around and break the attack with proactive hardening, with proactive security work that would break that attack, that would also break others. So it's really, really a lot of fun, and I hope you'll come join. And if you don't, well, then find me at a conference, especially at the next CanSecWest, or PACSec, or PACSec, or what have you.
That's awesome, Jay. That's great. I'm planning on slicing these up and stringing some of these tutorials out, because I really actually love the short tutorials. I think it's great. We'll also be putting us up on the website. And with that, we're about 15 minutes over, but that's all cool. That was a great demo. Thank you very much, Jay. I'll bid you, and I've got my kid starting to get noisy here, and he's got to go to sleep. So I'll bid you and everybody else good night. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll put these tutorials up. That was awesome. So Good night, folks. I'll end this webinar now. So have a great evening or day wherever you're at, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow evening for more of these. Cheers.